Chapter 1605. After leaving the glacier god mine, Ji Tianqing rode on his sword and sped through the sky. His return journey was quite smooth, and there were no mishaps along the way. Even if there were some giant beasts hiding in the Arctic abyss that attacked him when he passed by, he was able to avoid them. After leaving the Arctic abyss, there was no more danger. As he hurried back, he thought about his future plans. He had originally planned to investigate the whereabouts of the blood god and the primordial demon god through the tragedy in the glacier god mine. If he could find the primordial demon god, he would kill him at all costs. However, he had not expected that the Shenwu continent would also have such a powerful demon force. The two blood gods that he had killed were only small fries under the primordial demon god. The true powerhouses and main forces were the 36 demon sovereigns, including Ghost Child. With his current strength, he could not even defeat Ghost Child, let alone kill the primordial demon god. This plan could only be put aside for the time being, and he would consider it again when he was stronger. Thus, he could only leave the glacier god mine and return to Mount God Seal as soon as possible. What he needed to do next was to increase his strength as soon as possible. He needed to prepare for the God-Disciple test in 10 days and prepare for the 3 Divine Kingdoms exchange. After he met Yun Yao and reunited with Yun Yao, he would consider other matters. Unknowingly, 6 days passed. On the night of the 6th day, he returned to Mount God Seal covered in dust. Fortunately, he had returned in time. Tomorrow was the day when the divine light would descend. Ji Tianqing quietly returned to Mount God Seal without alerting anyone else. When he returned to the eastern courtyard of Heaven Saint Palace, it was already late at night, and everything was silent. He was mentally exhausted. After entering the secret room, he took a pill and sat down to meditate. The night passed quickly. By daybreak, his magic power had mostly recovered, and his mental state was much better. When the sun rose, he ended his cultivation. After changing into a clean set of clothes, he left the secret room and rushed to the sacred altar in the middle of Heaven Saint Palace. Half an hour later, he arrived at the sacred altar. It had been 3 months since he had last come to the sacred altar. The sacred altar looked the same as before, and it had not changed at all. The warm morning sun shone on the sacred altar, causing it to shine with a dazzling golden light. Around the holy altar, there were more than 30 statues of mythical beasts. They formed a circle around the holy altar as if they were guards. He stepped onto the giant stone steps and climbed to the top of the altar. Not long after, he crossed the 99 steps and arrived at the top of the holy altar. On the 10-zhang-wide platform, the ground was dark gold in color and carved with mysterious patterns. 2 divine dragons were circling around it. He sat on the ground with a calm expression, closed his eyes, and meditated, waiting patiently. Today was the day when the divine light descended. However, it was only a possibility. It might not really happen. He didn't have much hope. Not long after, light footsteps could be heard from below the altar. Ji Tianqing heard the sound and guessed the identity of the person. He opened his eyes and looked down. Sure enough, as he expected, a white-haired old man in a white robe had just walked to the bottom of the holy altar and was looking up at him. Elder Hong. He smiled and greeted the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man was Hong Chengtian. He also looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile and nodded slightly. I'm here to take a look. You are still so early. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, Elder Hong, come up and talk. No need. Hong Chengtian shook his head and said, my injuries have already healed, and my strength is slowly recovering. There's no need to devour the divine light anymore. You can continue with your cultivation. I'll just watch from here. Ji Tianqing didn't insist. He asked with concern, Elder Hong, have you collected enough outer space Xianbing and earth core fire crystal? Hong Qingtian raised his eyebrows and said with a bitter smile, "These two materials are precious treasures that can only be found by chance. How can it be gathered so quickly? However, don't worry. I predict that I'll be able to collect them before you participate in the kingdom exchange." Ji Tianqing was stunned. He smiled and said, "Elder Hong, are you so sure that I can participate in the kingdom exchange?" Hong Qingtian stroked his beard and said with a benevolent smile, "Of course. Disciples who can obtain the top 5 in the God-Disciple assessment are qualified to participate in the exchange. 3 months ago, you've already defeated the 4th-ranked genius, and you're ranked 4th. Now that 3 months have passed, your strength is even stronger than before. You'll definitely be ranked in the top 3. Ji Tianqing didn't try to be modest. He just smiled and nodded. He was the Son of God. No matter what kind of miracle he created, it wasn't rare. If he was modest on purpose, it would seem hypocritical. After a moment of silence, Hong Qingtian stopped smiling and said earnestly, "Actually, what I'm looking forward to the most is that you can obtain the first place in the assessment and become the number 1 genius. Only then will you be worthy of the identity of the Son of God and become the most valued God disciple of the Clear Sky Pagoda. At that time, not only will you be able to comprehend the Divine Master's secret technique, you'll also receive the most generous reward." Ji Tianqing also knew that Mount God would recruit a batch of God disciples every 20 years. Most of them would be mediocre even if they became God disciples. Only the number 1 God disciple had the most potential and could achieve great things in the future. He nodded calmly and said with a smile, "Since Elder Hong has such high expectations of me, how can I let you down? 10 days later, I'll come back with the first place." Hong Qingtian was stunned for a moment, then he revealed a gratified smile. He. You're really confident, but I'll support you." The two of them chatted and laughed. After an hour, the originally calm sky suddenly surged with wind and clouds. In the distant sky, a sea of white clouds was blown away by an invisible hurricane and rolled into a huge whirlpool. It was a whirlpool with a radius of 10,000 miles, facing Mount God. Around the whirlpool, the sky became dark. Even the golden sun became dim. The sudden change stunned Hong Qingtian for a moment, and then he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He stroked his white beard and said with a gratified face, "Tianqing, your time has come. The divine light is about to descend. You have to concentrate on refining the divine light without any distractions. I'll protect you." Ji Tianqing looked up at the sky. When he saw the changes in the sky, he revealed a look of anticipation. "Great! The divine light has finally descended. If I can refine the divine light before the God-Disciple assessment, my strength will definitely rise to another level." After muttering to himself, he quickly sat cross-legged on the holy altar. He put his palms together in front of his chest and silently cultivated. The changes in the sky lasted for 100 breaths before finally stabilizing. Then, the huge whirlpool formed by the wind and clouds lit up with a dazzling 7-colored brilliance. It poured down like a flood. Chapter 1606. The mighty rainbow divine light poured down like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. In that instant, the entire sky above God Seal Mountain was enveloped by the rainbow divine light, making it dazzling and brilliant. The divine light contained boundless spirit chi as it descended from the sky, heading straight for the holy altar in the middle of Heaven Saint Palace. Ji Tianqing sat unmoving at the top of the holy altar, his eyes still closed as he calmly cultivated. He could clearly feel the boundless spiritual energy pouring down from the top of his head. The next moment, the first rainbow divine light descended on the holy altar, drowning his figure. Swoosh! Instantly, boundless rainbow-colored divine light descended one after another, enveloping him and the entire holy altar. He did not feel any discomfort, nor did he feel any pain. All the pores on his body naturally opened as if they were greedily breathing, trying their best to devour the rainbow divine light. That dazzling rainbow divine light was formed by the extremely rich nine heavens spiritual liquid. It contained the purest dharmic power, the richest spirit chi of heaven and earth, and some mysterious power. That mysterious power could not only temper his body, but also rapidly strengthen his essence spirit. He guessed that this mysterious power was probably unique to the divine nations. Not long after, the rainbow divine light in the sky dissipated. The vortex with a radius of 10,000 miles also gradually collapsed, and the sky returned to its calm state. The divine light that descended from the nine heavens all gathered at the holy altar, surging like a tidal wave, but it did not dissipate. Ji Tianqing was submerged in the rainbow divine light, and he could only focus on devouring the divine light with all his might, refining it for his own use. Hong Qingtian stood below the holy altar, looking at the surging divine light. He smiled and stroked his beard, his voice filled with gratification. The winds and clouds of the nine heavens change drastically, and once they meet the divine light, they transform into dragons. Tianqing's luck is extremely good. The nine heavens divine light that he attracted this time is actually so vast and mighty. The divine light that I receive every year is not even half of this. Looks like his strength has increased explosively this time. Hong Qingtian's tone was somewhat emotional and envious. But he only felt gratified and expectant, happy for Ji Tianqing. Although he was not related to Ji Tianqing, his relationship with Ji Tianqing was even if it was not that of a master and disciple. He was happy that Ji Tianqing could benefit from it. He was also gratified that Ji Tianqing could create miracles and honor. If he could help Ji Tianqing, he would help. If there was something he could teach Ji Tianqing, he would not hold back and teach him everything he knew. To be honest, he and Ji Tianqing were more like good friends despite their age difference. At the same time, many people on Mount God Bestowment were alarmed by the changes in the sky and the seven-colored divine light. The descent of the rainbow-colored divine light brought with it vast and mighty spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Faint five-colored spiritual chi fell from the sky and enveloped the entire Mount God Bestowment. Whether it was the guards, the maids, or the 50 young geniuses, all of them could clearly feel that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth had increased by several times. Many people revealed looks of shock as they looked in the direction of the Heaven Saint Palace. Everyone could clearly see that the resplendent Heaven Saint Palace was shrouded in a seven-colored radiance, looking extremely dazzling. Without a doubt, the divine light descending from the nine heavens had landed in the Heaven Saint Palace. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth that everyone absorbed was only a drop in the ocean of the divine light. The majority of the divine light was within the Heaven Saint Palace. Thinking of this, everyone's hearts were filled with envy and jealousy. Especially the young geniuses of various countries, their emotions were even more complicated. Many thoughts flashed through their minds. The divine light has descended upon the Heaven Saint Palace. That is the place with the densest spiritual chi. Ji Tianqing is staying in the Heaven Saint Palace. He will definitely be able to devour a large amount of divine light and increase his strength greatly. Damn it! He doesn't cultivate as hard as we do, and he has to go through fewer hardships than we do, but he can reap the greatest benefits. It's really infuriating to compare oneself to others. The top geniuses will obtain the most cultivation resources and increase their strength the fastest. The gap between them and us will also quickly widen. I wonder what realm Ji Tianqing's strength will reach after he devours all that divine light. Will he be able to enter the top 3 in the God-disciple test in 10 days? Many geniuses pondered with complicated emotions for a moment before regaining their composure and continuing their cultivation. The guards and maids gathered in groups of 3 to 5. After discussing for an hour, they dispersed one after another. Within the Heaven Saint Palace, the seven-colored divine light enveloping the holy altar lasted for an entire day. Only when night fell did the dazzling seven-colored divine light disappear. All the divine light had been devoured. Of course, the energy contained within the divine light was too vast. With Ji Tianqing's strength, it was impossible for him to devour all of it. He had devoured about 50%, the burial of heaven had devoured 30%, and the heaven-mending pearl had devoured 20%. Even so, he could not refine the 50% of divine light he had devoured in a short period of time. He could only store the divine light in his body first and slowly refine and absorb it in the future to gradually increase his strength. When the divine light dissipated and the holy altar regained its calm, Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. A sharp light flashed across his eyes, and his body emitted an incomparably powerful and mysterious aura. Without a doubt, his strength had increased tremendously. Hong Qingtian stood below the holy altar for an entire day, guarding him to prevent any accidents from happening to him. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had ended his cultivation, he anxiously flew to the holy altar and landed beside Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, how did you finish devouring all the divine light in a day? Such a vast amount of divine light, and you are in such a hurry to devour it. It will cause harm to your body. As he spoke, Hong Qingtian looked at him with concern, checking his body's condition. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. Elder Hong, don't worry. I am fine. I will store the divine light in my body for the time being and slowly refine it in the future. Seeing that he was fine, Hong Qingtian was slightly relieved. Suddenly, he realized that Ji Tianqing's strength realm had changed, and he immediately revealed a look of shock. You actually broke through to the 7th level essence spirit realm? Didn't you not completely refine the divine light? How did you break through so quickly? Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, perhaps it's because I am the son of Oracle, so the kingdom of God took special care of me, sending down such a vast amount of divine light. The divine light's effects are extraordinary, allowing me to reap such bountiful rewards. Hong Qingtian thought for a moment and found it reasonable. He said with a smile, you are different from others. You will always create miracles and do all sorts of unbelievable things. Alright, I won't take up any more of your time. Cultivation time is precious. Quickly go back and cultivate in seclusion. Refine the divine light as soon as possible. Alright, then I'll take my leave first, Ji Tianqing replied with a nod and bowed before leaving the holy altar. Chapter 1607. In the dark chamber, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on a jade futon. His eyes were closed, and his hands were placed on his knees as he circulated his energy to refine the divine light. Hazy multicolored light enveloped his entire body. It flowed slowly like water, flickering between light and darkness. As time passed, the divine light hidden in his body was gradually refined, turning into pure and majestic dharmic powers that merged with his body. He had just broken through to the 7th level of the essence soul realm and could use the power of the divine light to consolidate his martial arts foundation and realm. The flow of time in the chamber was 5 times faster than the outside world. There were still 10 days before the God-disciple assessment. He could still cultivate in seclusion for another 50 days. He was confident that he could refine all the divine light in 50 days and increase his strength by 2 times. The next few days were very peaceful on the peak of Mount God Bestowment. It seemed peaceful on the surface, but in fact, a storm was brewing. The 50 young geniuses from the 6 nations were cultivating in seclusion day and night to increase their strength. In the previous ranking battle, 49 geniuses were eliminated and sent to the glacier divine mine to mine. This greatly stimulated them, igniting their fighting spirit and craziness. Everyone had a dream in their heart. Hidden within them was the ambition to become a martial arts expert. No one wanted to become a miner and die in a divine mine for the rest of their lives. Therefore, after the ranking battle ended, everyone cultivated crazily and spared no expense to achieve their goal. After all, there was not much difference in strength between the 4th and 6th levels of the essence soul realm. Moreover, in the previous trial in the mystic realm, everyone had gained a lot. In the past month, they had digested what they had gained and improved their strength rapidly. Unknowingly, 10 days passed. At this point, the geniuses from the various nations had been on Mount God bestowment for exactly half a year. The time limit was up. The God-disciple assessment was finally here. The next morning, the geniuses from the various nations were ready when the first glimmer of light appeared in the sky. Many of them changed into clean and tidy clothes and wore luxurious jade crowns and hair accessories. They were dressed rather solemnly. Everyone stepped out of their palaces one after another. Facing the rising sun, they rushed to the square outside the temple. Along the way, the geniuses from the various nations met each other but did not greet each other. Everyone's expression was indifferent. Their gazes towards each other faintly contained a sense of scrutiny and vigilance. Not only between countries, but even when the geniuses of their own countries met, they were no longer as friendly and close as before. They became very distant and cold. After all, today's God-disciple assessment would decide everyone's fate. Everyone, no matter which empire they came from, had to fight for themselves. Apart from himself, everyone else could become his opponent. It didn't take long for the geniuses from various countries to arrive at the plaza outside the temple. They stood in the plaza and waited. Everyone was silent and did not gather together to discuss. Some people were quietly pondering, while others were secretly observing the other geniuses, checking on the progress of their strength. The atmosphere was heavy and stifling. Everyone felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on their hearts. At the same time, in the eastern courtyard of the Heaven Saint Palace, Ji Tianqing also ended his secluded cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. When he walked out of the secret room, the two golden-armored guards who were guarding the door clearly felt that his temperament and aura were different from before. 10 days ago, when he entered the secret chamber to cultivate in seclusion, his body contained boundless divine light. His aura was vast and majestic, like a violent giant beast that struck fear in others. But now, he had become ordinary and plain. His aura was restrained and peaceful, just like a mortal. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that his eyes were dark and clear, as bright as the stars. His entire body had a noble aura that was one with heaven and earth. There was no doubt that he had refined all the divine light. Although his strength was still at the 7th level of the primordial soul realm, his martial foundation was solid, and his combat strength had more than doubled. He had already reached the peak of the 7th level of the primordial soul realm and was not far from the 8th level. Reporting to young Master Ji, the 3 guardians are waiting for you outside. A golden-armored guard came forward, bowed respectfully, and reported the news. Ji Tianqing nodded and waved his hand, indicating for the golden-armored guard to leave. Moments later, he walked to the entrance of the courtyard and saw Hong Qingtian standing under a big tree, waiting patiently. "Elder Hong, why are you here?" He revealed a gentle smile and greeted Hong Qingtian. Hong Qingtian sized him up with bright eyes before revealing a gratified smile. He said, "Today is the day of the God-disciple test. Of course, I have to watch it with you. Besides, I also want to see the results of your seclusion. It seems that you have refined the divine light and your strength has improved. You are not far from the 8th level of the primordial soul realm?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded. Hong Qingtian walked side by side with him and left the east courtyard, rushing towards the temple square. On the way to the square, Hong Qingtian exhorted in a solemn tone, "Tianqing, with your strength at the 7th level of the primordial soul realm, it is certain that you will enter the top 3. But I have to remind you that you should act according to your strength when it comes to obtaining first place." "Oh? Why do you say so?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, revealing a trace of doubt. Hong Qingtian explained, those 50 disciples were probably stimulated by the previous ranking battle. They have been cultivating crazily for the past month to improve their strength at all costs. They have all benefited from the training in the mystic realm. The results of this month's arduous cultivation are remarkable. Many of them have broken through their realms and their strength has increased tremendously. According to the Great Guardian, almost all of those disciples have reached the 5th level of the primordial soul realm. There are even more than a dozen disciples who have reached the 6th level of the primordial soul realm. The person who has improved the most is the number 1 genius, Qin Sangxiong. It is said that he has mastered the sky blade and his combat strength has increased by more than 5 times. Even the Great Guardian is shocked. Tianqing, if you want to obtain first place, he is a formidable opponent. Tianqing remained calm after hearing that. He chuckled and said, "It's okay. Even if my strength increases by 10 times, the result will not change, let alone 5 times. Hong Qingtian was stunned for a moment. He glanced at him with a strange gaze. Isn't this kid too confident? Qin Sangxiong is at the same realm as him. Furthermore, he has mastered the superior grade tribulation level Sky Blade. His combat strength must be extraordinary." Although Hong Qingtian thought so, he did not say anything else. Since Tianqing was so confident, Hong Qingtian was also filled with anticipation. He wanted to see what methods Tianqing had that made him look down on Qin Sangxiong. 15 minutes later, the two of them arrived at the square outside the temple. The 50 geniuses from the various countries were all present. They were scattered around the square. Seeing Tianqing and Hong Qingtian arrive, everyone turned their heads and looked at Tianqing, scrutinizing him. Chapter 1608. Tianqing stepped into the plaza and found a random spot to stand. The geniuses of the various empires were secretly sizing him up, observing his cultivation level and changes. Among those complicated gazes, there were a few that were filled with hatred and killing intent. Tianqing sensed that something was amiss and turned his head to look towards the southeast of the plaza. There were a few geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire standing there, including Yin Wuk. Yin Wuk's expression was still calm, and his eyes were filled with kindness. However, Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long, and the others' eyes were filled with undisguised hatred and killing intent. Even though Tianqing was looking at them, they did not avoid Tianqing's gaze. Seeing this, Tianqing was stunned. However, he immediately understood the reason, and his lips curled into a cold smile. Hee, looks like these fellows already know what happened in the Chu Yun Empire, and they're blaming me for it. However, he did not take the people of the Chu Yun Empire seriously, and he calmly retracted his gaze. Seeing his reaction, Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long, and the others became even angrier. The 5 of them gathered together and discussed telepathically. That damn Tianqing, that despicable bastard, his crimes are unforgivable, and his death is not to be regretted. If he did not publicly offer the treasure to the Sage Emperor, how could the 5 empires have surrounded the imperial city and forced the Sage Emperor and the Sage Emperor to flee? Yesterday, my family sent me another jade scroll to tell me the latest news. The Sage Emperor and the Sage Emperor are still missing, and there is no news of them. The experts of the various empires are all looking for them, vowing to snatch the sword of burial of heaven. The imperial city has been destroyed by the experts of the various empires, and it has been reduced to rubble. Millions of citizens have lost their homes. Now, the entire empire has fallen apart, and the Chu Yun Empire only exists in name. In order to protect themselves, the various city lords and tyrants have all formed their own factions, and they are fighting against the experts of the 5 empires. Once the war started, the entire empire collapsed and fell apart. Billions of citizens have fallen into an abyss of suffering, and they are at the mercy of the various empires. The border guards were still tenaciously holding on and fighting, but they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Based on the current situation, it will take at most 2 to 3 years for the empire's territory to be divided up by the 5 empires. This is all Ji Tianqing's fault. He was the culprit. If he hadn't offered the sword of burial of heaven to the Saint Emperor, how could he have ended up like this? The young geniuses were filled with grief and indignation when they talked about the current situation of the Chu Yun Empire. The tragedy that had befallen the Chu Yun Empire had forced them to work together and treat Ji Tianqing as their mortal enemy. Lan Yiqing became the backbone of the group, and Yin Wuke was excluded. After all, everyone knew that Yin Wuke was the closest to Ji Tianqing, and he had even benefited greatly from it. Lan Yiqing pondered for a moment, then transmitted his voice to the geniuses. Ji Tianqing is not only our enemy, but also the enemy of the entire Chu Yun Empire. If there is a chance, we must kill him at all costs to get rid of him and take revenge for the people of the empire. A young man shook his head and said angrily, "But we are on God's Sealing Mountain and we don't have a chance to do anything to him. Do we have to monitor him and wait for him to leave God's Sealing Mountain before we kill him?" Another dark-skinned man frowned and said worriedly, "We have already fought with him before. Even if we attacked together, we were still no match for him. Even if he leaves God's Sealing Mountain, we may not be able to kill him." At this moment, Kuang Long smirked and said coldly, "Don't worry, we don't have to wait for him to leave God's Sealing Mountain. Today, we can take revenge." The 3 young geniuses looked at him and asked curiously, "Kuang Long, do you have a plan?" Kuang Long nodded and said seriously, "Today's God-disciple test is our last chance. If we miss this chance, it will be difficult to kill him." Everyone knew that after the God-disciple test, Ji Tianqing would definitely become a God-disciple and enter the top 5. As for the few of them, they would most likely be eliminated and sent to the glacier mine to mine. From then on, they would not even be able to see Ji Tianqing's face. How would they have the chance to kill him? At this thought, the hatred in their hearts intensified and they gritted their teeth. Kuang Long continued, "For today's God-disciple test, we will draw lots to decide our opponents and fight in the arena. Among the 5 of us, there will be 1 or 2 who will have the chance to fight with Ji Tianqing." He paused and asked in a low voice, "If there is a way for you to severely injure or kill Ji Tianqing, but you will also lose your lives, would you be willing to do it?" The 3 young geniuses were stunned and weighed their options seriously. Sacrifice our lives to severely injure or kill Ji Tianqing? Ji Tianqing is the son of God and I am just an ordinary genius. After today, I will be sent to the glacier mine to mine. I am willing. The empire has collapsed because of Ji Tianqing. My family has also suffered a great loss because of Ji Tianqing and is on the verge of disbanding. As long as I can kill him, I am willing to exchange my life for his." The 3 of them hesitated for a moment and nodded their heads in agreement. Kuang Long looked relieved and said with a sinister smile, "If that is the case, I am relieved. I have 5 burning spirit and blood explosion elixirs. Later on, each of us will take 1. Whoever fights with Ji Tianqing in the arena secretly takes the burning spirit and blood explosion elixir. You will definitely be able to kill Ji Tianqing when he least expects it." Suddenly hearing this news, the 3 young geniuses were shocked and aghast. Burning spirit and blood explosion elixir? Isn't that a forbidden elixir of the ultimate primordial soul grade? Once you take the burning spirit and blood explosion elixir, you will be able to burn your primordial soul and explode your blood vessels. It will be like a self-explosion and explode with 10 times the power. In this way, Ji Tianqing will be caught off guard. Even if he doesn't die, he will be severely injured. However, if you take this forbidden elixir, you will explode and die. There is no doubt that you will die." Kuang Long grinned and sneered, "Are you afraid? Lan Yi and I have already decided that if we fight with Ji Tianqing, we will definitely take this elixir. Also, other than the burning spirit and blood explosion elixir, we have other preparations. I, Kuang Long, have already sworn that even if my blood spills all over the arena and my bones are crushed, I will drag Ji Tianqing down with me." The three young geniuses looked at Kuang Long in awe and respect. "Kuang Long, you are so determined?" Lan Yi explained. 3 days ago, Kuang Long received a message from his family. His family was besieged by the elites of the two empires and many of them were killed. The millions of miles of land under his family were also occupied by the armies of the two empires. Chapter 1609. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The sun rose into the sky and shone with golden sunlight, covering the peak of the Mount of Gods. Under everyone's anticipation, the Great Guardian and the 6 gods' messengers finally arrived at the square. The Great Guardian walked to the center of the square and asked the 6 gods' messengers to count the number of people to see if everyone was present and if anyone was absent. In just 10 breaths, the 6 gods' messengers had counted the number of people present. After making sure that all 51 geniuses were present, the Great Guardian said in a serious tone, "Everyone, today is the day of the God's disciple assessment, and its importance is self-evident. It has been half a year since everyone came to the Mount of Gods. In this half a year, everyone has been cultivating diligently. Today's assessment is to test the results of everyone's cultivation. The assessment method is very simple. Fighting in the arena is the best way to test one's strength. The rules of this assessment are the same as usual. You are not allowed to use your battle pets or spirit beasts. You are not allowed to rely on external forces, and you are not allowed to kill anyone. You will draw lots to determine your opponents. You will fight one-on-one. The winner will advance, and the loser will be eliminated. In the end, the top 10 disciples will become honorary gods' disciples. The top 5 disciples will represent the Mount of Gods and participate in the exchange meeting of the 3 holy kingdoms. Those who fail will be sent to the glacier mine." The Great Guardian's majestic voice rang out above the square, shaking everyone's hearts and stimulating their fighting spirit. Many people's eyes lit up, and they exuded a strong fighting spirit. Their expressions were firm and unyielding. The Great Guardian looked around and was satisfied with everyone's reaction. He continued, "Of course, the Divine Master does not only look at strength when selecting God's disciples. In addition to fighting in the arena, if anyone has special talents such as array formation, alchemy, talisman, etc., they can also accept my assessment. As long as one of these talents can reach the tribulation level, they can also become a god's disciple." Many geniuses' eyes lit up when they heard the Great Guardian's words. However, the flames of hope that had just been ignited were quickly extinguished. After all, the young geniuses present were only at the primordial soul realm. Even if someone was proficient in alchemy, array formation, and talisman, they could not reach the tribulation level. Then, the Great Guardian waved his hands and cast a spell to set up a large array. A 5-colored light barrier shrouded the entire square. Within the light barrier, within a radius of 2,000 feet, was the arena for this assessment. Everyone was outside the light barrier, standing at the edge of the square to watch the battle. 50 disciples will participate in the first round of assessment. As the son of the oracle, Ji Tianqing does not need to participate in the first round. The Great Guardian announced the start of the test with a dignified voice. Then, he took out 50 jade slips and suspended them in the air. The 50 jade slips danced in the air at an extremely fast speed, crossing each other for a long time before they gradually stopped flying and divided into 25 pairs. Many geniuses cursed in their hearts at the head protector's decision. They were very jealous of Ji Tianqing, but there was nothing they could do. The 5 geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire frowned with ugly expressions. The chief guardian took out the first pair of jade slips and read aloud, "The first round of the examination begins now. The first match, Tao Yunjian vs. Gong Tiangao." As his voice fell, the two young geniuses whose names were called walked out of the crowd with serious expressions and stepped into the five-colored light shield. The two young geniuses had strength at the fifth firmament essence spirit realm. They exuded a ferocious and sharp aura. The two of them did not say anything superfluous. They did not even exchange pleasantries or bow. When the chief guardian announced the start of the battle, the two of them drew their Dharma treasures and charged forward without any regard for their own safety. The intense fighting continued for a full 15 minutes before gradually coming to a stop. One of them had his arms and legs severed. His body was severely injured and his combat strength was severely reduced. He had no choice but to admit defeat. Although the other person won, it was a Pyrrhic victory that left him covered in injuries. After the battle ended, the loser was helped away to recuperate. The victors sat at the edge of the square and consumed pills to recuperate, preparing for the next round of the examination. Following that, the chief guardian read out one pair of names after another. Pairs of young geniuses took the stage one after another. They used their mystic techniques with all their might and fought their opponents to a standstill. Deafening booms filled the air above the square for a long time. The dazzling radiance of dermic spells illuminated half the sky, covering the radiance of the sun. All sorts of powerful mystic techniques caused the ground to tremble incessantly. Countless ravines cracked open and turned the ground into ruins. Fortunately, the defensive array set up by the chief guardian was strong enough to block all the aftershocks of the battle. Everyone watched the battle from outside the light shield and was not affected at all. Unknowingly, 8 hours had passed. It was evening and the sun was setting in the west. The first round of the examination had finally ended. 25 young geniuses who were covered in injuries and looked miserable were eliminated. They left the square with gloomy expressions. The 25 geniuses who had won were also injured. They were busy recuperating and recuperating. Their expressions were still solemn. They did not dare to relax at all. Everyone knew that the first round of the examination was just an appetizer. The next few rounds of the examination were the fiercest battles. Qin Cangqiong, Song Zhanyu, and Jiang Ningxue were the top 5 geniuses. They easily defeated their opponents and were not injured. They secretly observed Ji Tianqing and viewed him as their strongest opponent. Only 4 people from the Chu Yun Empire advanced. They were Wu Kei, Lan Yiqing, Quang Long, and a young genius. The chief guardian allowed everyone to rest for 2 hours. At dusk, the second round of the examination finally began. The 25 geniuses and Ji Tianqing made a total of 26 people. They had to draw lots to determine their opponents. The chief guardian waved his hand and took out 26 jade slips. After a while, the results were drawn. He picked up the jade slips and read them one by one. The second round of the examination has begun. The first round, Jiang Ningxue vs Tian Yuchuan. The second round, Hua Qingyu vs Ji Tianqing. The third round, Qian Feiyang vs. Ji Tianqing's expression was calm as usual as he listened to the result read out by the great guardian. However, Lan Yiqing, Quang Long, and the other two's eyes lit up. They were filled with joy. The young genius beside Quang Long looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His body froze on the spot and his expression became strange. Obviously, he was Hua Qingyu. He was going to fight Ji Tianqing. Quang Long stared at him and said in a serious tone, "Hua Qingyu, the time to sacrifice your life for the empire has come. Remember, before the battle, you must bite the elixir hidden in your mouth. As long as you can kill Ji Tianqing, even if you die, it will be worth it. You will be the greatest hero of the Chu Yun Empire. All of us will remember your contributions and sacrifice. You will be remembered in history." Chapter 1610. Both Hua Qingyu and Kuang Long knew that once he consumed the burning spirit blood explosion pill, it would be irreversible. Regardless of whether they could kill Ji Tianqing, he would definitely die. It was easy to talk about life and death. When it came to the critical moment, it was hard to make up one's mind. Hua Qingyu lowered his head, his expression as cold as ice. His eyes flickered for a long time, and his emotions were complicated and perturbed. A full 100 breaths had passed, but he still had not calmed down. At this moment, the first battle was about to end. Jiang Ningxue was the third-ranked genius, while Tian Yushang was only at the 5th level Essence Soul Realm and was not well known. After exchanging more than 100 blows, Tian Yushang was severely injured and fainted on the spot from Jiang Ningxue's attack. At the end of the battle, the chief guardian announced the results. Tian Yushang was eliminated and carried out of the 5-colored light barrier by the golden armored guards. Jiang Ningxue only suffered minor injuries and returned to the crowd calmly. The second battle was about to begin. Ji Tianqing stepped into the 5-colored light barrier with a calm expression and stood in the middle of the arena. Hua Qingyu was still in a daze as he pondered. Kuang Long was anxious and hurriedly sent a voice transmission to urge him, "Hua Qingyu, what are you waiting for? You must not miss such a great opportunity. If you back down, we will never forgive you." Lan Yiqing looked at him coldly and shouted, "Don't worry. Even if you can't kill Ji Tianqing, you can injure him severely. When we meet him, we will definitely kill him to avenge you, us, and the Outcloud Empire." Hua Qingyu's fighting spirit was ignited, and he finally made up his mind. A light flashed in his right hand, and a dark red pill the size of a date pit appeared. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he raised his hand and stuffed the pill into his mouth. The next moment, he strode into the 5-colored light barrier with his head held high and walked toward Ji Tianqing with a murderous aura. Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long looked at his narrow back and clearly felt a solemn and stirring atmosphere. It was a determination to perish together with his opponent even though he knew he would die. A moment later, Hua Qingyu walked to the center of the ring and stood 1,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing, his body exuding a strong killing intent as he shouted in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing. You despicable dog. You've caused our Chu Yun Empire to fall apart. We've been besieged by the other empires, and countless people have died. Today, I will kill you to avenge Tianqing and rid the world of evil." Ji Tianqing's body was as straight as a sword as he stood on the square with an indifferent expression. He glanced at Hua Qingyu indifferently and said calmly, "Fortune and misfortune do not belong to anyone. If Saint Emperor Chu Yun did not intend to harm me, how could I have ended up like this? As for the destruction of the Chu Yun Empire and the destruction of the people, what does that have to do with me? If you hate someone, you should hate Saint Emperor Chu Yun." Hua Qingyu's anger and murderous intent wantonly attacked his rationality. His eyes were red, and his face was distorted as he roared, "Bullshit! Do you think you can shirk responsibility by quibbling like this? You're the culprit, and your death is not to be regretted." Ji Tianqing frowned and shouted coldly, "Looks like you've forgotten the lesson from before. I'll give you a chance. Admit defeat and retreat, and you'll still be safe. Don't wait for me to make a move, or you won't even have the chance to admit defeat." Hua Qingyu's face turned even redder, and a dark red glow appeared in his eyes. However, he still didn't make a move, nor did he want to admit defeat. He cursed with a venomous tone, "Ji Tianqing, you despicable bastard. Are you afraid now after doing those outrageous things?" Obviously, he was deliberately stalling for time. The burning spirit blood explosion elixir was rapidly melting in his body, turning into countless dark red currents that surged into his limbs, bones, and primordial spirit. An incomparably violent and destructive power was madly gathering in his body. He could clearly feel that his dermic power and primordial spirit power were soaring at an unbelievable speed. In just 3 short breaths, his strength had doubled. As long as he could delay for another 10 breaths of time, his strength would skyrocket by 4 times. However, Hua Qingyu's plan was destined to fail. Ji Tianqing was acutely aware that there was a violent power running amok in his body, like a volcano that was about to erupt. When Ji Tianqing saw his skin turn red and his eyes glowing red, he realized what was going on. Ha ha ha. Using such crooked means to increase your combat power? What a useless piece of trash. After a sneer, he suddenly raised his right hand and slammed it over. Heaven-seizing palm. A giant golden palm the size of a millstone appeared out of thin air and slammed toward Hua Qingyu at a speed faster than lightning. Hua Qingyu did not back down. He quickly took out a halberd that was more than 10 feet long and waved it toward the giant palm, creating a sky full of flames. Bam! 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 In a series of muffled sounds, the sky full of flames exploded, turning into fiery fragments that scattered in all directions. Hua Qingyu and his halberd were sent flying and slammed into the 5-colored light shield. When he got up from the ground, he was bleeding from all 7 orifices. A large part of his chest had caved in, revealing his white bones. Although he was severely injured, he did not seem to feel any pain. He waved his halberd wildly and charged toward Ji Tianqing without any regard for his life. Ji Tianqing. The Chu-Yun Empire is your sworn enemy and will never forgive you. Hua Qingyu roared hysterically and desperately waved his halberd of flames and golden light. They turned into thousands of spear shadows and shrouded Ji Tianqing's figure. Hua Qingyu's desperate and frenzied charge made Ji Tianqing even more certain that there was something wrong with him. Around the square, the great guardian, Hong Tian, and a few oracles who were watching the battle also sensed that something was wrong. What's going on? Hua Qingyu seems to have lost his mind. I heard him yelling about the Chu-Yun Empire being his sworn enemy. It seems to be because of the Chu-Yun Empire. By the way, I heard that the Holy Emperor and Holy Master of the Chu-Yun Empire have disappeared for more than a month. Now the Chu-Yun Empire is in chaos and the imperial city has been destroyed into ruins. That's true. I heard about it too. However, Mount God has never cared about worldly affairs. But no matter how monstrous Ji Tianqing is, he can't possibly cause the Chu-Yun Empire to be destroyed. What's wrong with Hua Qingyu? He's completely disregarding his life and looks like he wants to perish together with Ji Tianqing. Perish together? You're thinking too much. How can Hua Qingyu have that ability? Just as the crowd was discussing telepathically, there was a change in the battle situation in the arena. The power of the burning spirit blood explosion elixir was about to reach its peak. Hua Qingyu's body was as red as fire. His meridians, flesh, and skin were all red and swollen as if they were about to explode. His combat strength had also increased by several times. He rushed toward Ji Tianqing without any regard for his life and vowed to kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. However, Ji Tianqing saw through the clues and made a prompt decision to use his ultimate skill. Soul Slash. Chapter 16:11. Swish. 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 4 golden swords tore through the sky. Regardless of whether it was the monstrous flames or the sky full of spear shadows, they were unable to stop the golden swords' attack. All obstacles were destroyed by the golden swords. In the next moment, 4 golden light magic swords pierced Hua Qingyu, piercing his shoulders and legs respectively. Bam! 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 The 4 golden swords pierced through his body. The violent impact sent him flying and crashing into the 5-colored light shield at the edge of the square. The 4 golden swords were so powerful that they pierced into the 5-colored light shield. Hua Qingyu was also nailed to the 5-colored light shield by the 4 golden swords. No matter how hard he struggled, the 4 golden swords did not move or dissipate. He could not break free in a short period of time. Ji Tianqing stood at the other end of the square and looked at him coldly from 2,000 feet away. Hua Qingyu, the outcome has been decided. Admit defeat. Everyone who heard this thought that it was a matter of course. No one thought that Ji Tianqing was arrogant. After all, Hua Qingyu was nailed to the formation light shield before he could even touch the corner of Ji Tianqing's clothes. The difference in strength was too great. However, Hua Qingyu had gone crazy and could not listen to anything. His body swelled violently and his skin and flesh cracked continuously. His entire body was burning with blood-red flames. An incomparably violent flame current erupted from his body. No! I don't want to die. Hua Qingyu struggled wildly and used all his strength to let out a final roar. A deep and vigorous roar reverberated within the light shield of the formation. In the next moment, his entire body exploded with a bang. His fleshly body and nascent spirit had turned into surging, bloody light that spread out in all directions in the form of overwhelming, bloody flames. It was like a blood-red mushroom cloud rose into the sky and quickly filled the entire formation. The earth-shattering explosion was like a thunderclap that resounded in the sky for hundreds of miles. The entire peak of Mount Godseal shook violently. The raging blood-red flames crazily attacked the defensive formation, causing the 5-colored light barrier to shake violently. At that moment, everyone was stunned. The Great Guardian, Hongqing Tian, the 6 divine messengers, and more than 20 geniuses were dumbfounded. No one expected Hua Qingyu to explode. How could this be? Is this a self-explosion? Why did Hua Qingyu self-explode? Oh my God! It's just the God-disciple assessment. Even if he is eliminated, he will be sent to the mines. Why did he have to self-explode? Hua Qingyu is usually very ordinary and low-key. He doesn't seem like a crazy person. Why would he do something so crazy? The self-explosion of an primordial spirit is. This time, Ji Tianqing is definitely done for. Even if he doesn't die from the explosion, he will be seriously injured. Everyone cried out in surprise and disgust in disbelief. In the next moment, the Great Guardian and Hongqing Tian came back to their senses. Their faces changed drastically, and they rushed into the 5-colored light barrier without caring about anything else. Oh no! Ji Tianqing is going to die. Oh no, Tianqing is okay. However, before they could rush into the defensive formation, Ji Tianqing's voice rang in their heads. Don't worry, I'm fine. When the Great Guardian and Hongqing Tian heard this, they finally let out a sigh of relief. They had been in charge of Mount Godseal for many years and had presided over countless God-disciple assessments. They rarely encountered such an accident. As long as it was a normal person, who would self-destruct to attack their opponent. After a long time, the blood-red flames in the 5-colored light shield dissipated. Everyone stared at the arena, waiting for the result. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon, in particular, had complicated expressions and their hearts were in their throats. Both of them were looking forward to it, hoping that Hua Qingyu's self-destruction would kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. Even if it did not, it would be a good thing if Ji Tianqing was seriously injured. However, when all the flames and dust dissipated, the two of them were dumbfounded when they saw the scene in the arena. Ji Tianqing, dressed in a white robe, was standing in the arena unscathed. There was not a single injury on his body. Even the jade crown and hairstyle on his head were as good as new. The terrifying power of Hua Qingyu's self-destruction had no effect on him at all. The Great Guardian, Hongqing Tian, several divine envoys, and many other geniuses were in disbelief. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon looked terrible. They gritted their teeth in anger. Damn bastard! Not only is he not dead, he is not injured at all. How is this possible? Hua Qingyu has the strength of a 5th-level Essence Soul Realm Cultivator. The power of his self-explosion can kill a 6th-level Essence Soul Realm Cultivator. How can Ji Tianqing be unscathed? Even if the two of them could not accept the result, the truth was right in front of them. No matter how angry they were, it was useless. The Great Guardian announced the result with a dignified expression. He said loudly, "The second battle, Ji Tianqing wins." Let me reiterate that today's God-disciple assessment is a fair competition and not a fight to the death. If anyone uses such extreme means again, I will not let them off easily. The crowd heard the Great Guardian's warning and felt ashamed. They muttered to themselves, other than that lunatic Hua Qingyu, who would self-explode for a test. Ji Tianqing left the arena calmly and walked out of the 5-colored light shield. He glanced coldly at Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon before turning to walk back to Hong Qingtian's side. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon trembled when he looked at them. They lowered their heads guiltily. However, the Great Guardian's warning and Ji Tianqing's glare could not extinguish the fire of hatred in their hearts. Hong Qingtian saw that Ji Tianqing had returned safely. He looked at him seriously and reminded him through voice transmission, "Tianqing, what happened to Hua Qingyu? Why did he self-explode all of a sudden?" Ji Tianqing looked nonchalant and said with a smile, "Elder Hong, are you suspecting that I used a secret technique to explode him?" "That's not it." Hong Qingtian shook his head and said in a complicated tone, "I just don't understand. What kind of blood feud would make him so crazy?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said calmly, "Who knows? Maybe that guy was bewitched by someone." Hong Qingtian thought for a moment and reminded him solemnly, "Tianqing, I saw the scene when Hua Qingyu self-destructed. It didn't look like a normal self-destruct. It's very likely that he used some kind of secret technique or elixir pill. I don't know much about the feud between you and the Chu Yun Empire and I won't interfere. However, you have to be extra careful in the next few rounds of the assessment." Ji Tianqing understood his concern and had already guessed it. He nodded and agreed. The assessment continued. Chapter 16:12. 4 hours later, it was already late at night. The moon hung high in the night sky, and the stars twinkled in the sky. The second round of the assessment had finally ended. The 13 geniuses who had won successfully advanced to the next round. They included Ji Tianqing, Qin Sangqiong, Song Zhanyu, Jiang Ningxue, Qian Feiyang, Lan Yiqing, and others. Quang Long was one of the 13 geniuses who had been eliminated. However, the rules of the God-Sealing Mountain were strict and fair. The 13 geniuses who had been eliminated could go through 2 more rounds of battles to choose the strongest 3. These 3 would draw lots with the 13 geniuses who had advanced to the next round to fight for the 10 spots of God's disciples. Ji Tianqing, Qin Sangqiong, and the others stayed at the edge of the square to rest. The 13 geniuses who had been eliminated began to fight. This was their last chance, so everyone was eager to participate. Even if they were severely injured, even if they had lost an arm or a leg, they gritted their teeth and went up to the arena. A series of incomparably tragic battles played out unceasingly on the arena. The 13 geniuses who had been eliminated spent 2 hours to go through 2 rounds of battles to decide the 3 strongest geniuses. These 3 strongest geniuses were the lucky ones. They had taken the last chance to draw lots with the 13 geniuses who had advanced to the next round to fight for the 10 spots of God's disciples. Quang Long was one of the 3 strongest geniuses. He had used a forbidden secret skill that he had never used before. He had sacrificed 300 years of his life to defeat his opponent. Although he had succeeded, his martial arts foundation had been destroyed. He would be stuck at the primordial soul realm for the rest of his life. Besides Lan Yiqing, no one knew why he had done so. Only 16 geniuses were left out of the original 51. The other 35 geniuses had been eliminated. They left the square and went back to their residences to recover. Among the 16 geniuses, most of them were severely injured, except for a few powerful ones. The Great Guardian followed the rules and gave everyone 6 hours to rest. When the long night had passed and a new day had arrived, the third round of the assessment had officially begun. Swoosh! The Great Guardian took out 16 jade slips and threw them into the sky, where they started to spin rapidly. After a while, the drawing of lots ended. The 16 jade slips were divided into 8 pairs and floated in front of the Great Guardian. He picked up each pair of jade slips and read out the names of the geniuses. The third round of the assessment will now begin. First match, Yin Wuke vs Lan Yiqing. The second match was between Qin Cangqiong and Li Jiudao. The third match was between Ji Tianqing and Mad Dragon. The fourth match, Jiang Ningxue vs. The 16 young geniuses wore complicated expressions as they murmured in their hearts after hearing the Great Guardian's announcement. Yin Wuk and Lan Yiqing were both geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire. It was considered a civil war between the two of them, which was very disadvantageous to the Outcloud Empire. However, the Chu Yun Empire had fallen apart and only existed in name. Even if they had a civil war, not many people would sympathize with them. Lan Yiqing's face was gloomy. He looked at Yin Wuke with hostility. Although it was quite a pity that she couldn't compete with Ji Tianqing. However, Yin Wuke and Ji Tianqing were good friends, so she transferred her hatred towards Ji Tianqing to Yin Wu. Quebec Wuke could feel her hatred and killing intent, but he didn't care. In the past few months, he had been cultivating the limitless Yin Yang skill. He had made some progress and was extremely confident in himself. Out of everyone, the most excited person was Mad Dragon. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. His eyes shone with excitement as he roared in his heart. Ha ha ha! The heavens are helping me. This is the will of the heavens. Even the heavens are helping me. Ji Tianqing is dead meat. With the burning soul blood explosion pill and the soul-destroying nail, I will destroy his body and soul. As he roared in his heart, his eyes shone with blood-red killing intent as he looked at Ji Tianqing from afar. Coincidentally, Ji Tianqing was also staring at him with a cold gaze, and a mocking sneer hung on the corner of his mouth. Seeing Ji Tianqing's reaction, Mad Dragon's heart skipped a beat. Ji Tianqing. Could it be that he has already noticed my plan and seen through my thoughts? After being stunned for a while, he came back to his senses and laughed coldly. Humph. So what if he has seen through my plan? The results of the draw have already been decided. I will fight him. Anyway, he had already made up his mind to die. With his 2 powerful trump cards, he would definitely be able to drag Ji Tianqing down with him. Soon, the third round of the test began. Yin Wuk and Lan Yiqing stepped into the array and stood still in the arena. Both of them were silent as they looked at each other coldly. Hearing the Great Guardian's command, both of them took out the Yin Yang umbrella and the extreme ice sword without hesitation and began to fight fiercely. Half a year ago, Lan Yiqing was the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. Her strength far exceeded Yin Wuk's. She had mastered the primordial spirit sword control technique and the Xian Bing sword realm. She also had the tribulation level extreme ice sword. Now, she was at the 6th level of the primordial spirit realm and was close to the 7th level. Her strength had increased by several times. She was confident that she could defeat Yin Wuk. After all, she knew him very well. However, not long after the two of them started fighting, she repeatedly revealed a look of astonishment, and her heart was incomparably shocked. The current Yin Wuk was clearly not the same Yin Wuk from half a year ago. Not only was he stronger, but the secret techniques he used were also unfamiliar to Lan Yiqing. Especially the Yin Yang umbrella. Under his control, it could appear and disappear unpredictably. It was ever-changing and unbelievably powerful. The two of them had only exchanged 20 moves when Lan Yiqing was at a disadvantage. She was sent flying by Yin Wux's palm strike. After 40 moves, Lan Yiqing was forced to retreat. She had almost no strength to fight back. Her injuries were also worsening. After 100 moves, Lan Yiqing was bleeding from all her orifices. She was sent flying and crashed into the 5-colored light barrier. Before she could get up, Yin Wux had already descended from the sky. He held the yin-yang umbrella and released a huge wheel. It was a black and white wheel. It carried the power of yin and yang in the world as it came crashing down. Lan Yiqing's expression changed drastically. She waved the extreme ice sword with all her strength, wanting to form the Xianbing sword realm to block it. However, with a loud boom, the sword realm that had not yet formed was shattered by the black and white wheel. She was also suppressed by the black and white wheel. She crashed into the ground pathetically. Her vision turned black and she fainted. The battle ended. Yin Wux had won easily. After the Great Guardian announced the result, Yin Wux held the yin-yang umbrella and slowly left the arena. The unconscious Lan Yiqing was also carried away by the golden-armored guards. Seeing this scene, everyone realized that Yin Wux's strength had increased by a lot. Kuang Long's expression was very dark. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. Hua Qingyu is dead. Lan Yiqing has been defeated. I'm the only one left, Ji Tianqing, I can't wait any longer. Let's welcome death together. Chapter 1613. Soon, the second round of the battle began. Qin Sangxiong, who was dressed in gray linen clothes, was the first to enter the ring. He held his Sangxiong saber and stood proudly in the middle of the ring. His opponent was a burly middle-aged man. His name was Li Jiudao. Coincidentally, he was also a genius expert who used the saber. His saber skills were exquisite. Unfortunately, he was unlucky to have encountered the number one genius, Qin Sangxiong. Compared to Qin Sangxiong's ferocious saber skills, his saber skills paled in comparison. They were inferior and clumsy. After exchanging 30 blows, Li Jiudao's saber was knocked out of his hand. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. Li Jiudao was straightforward. He admitted defeat without hesitation. After all, from the moment the results of the draw came out, he had already predicted the result. He could only admit that he was unlucky to have fought with Qin Sangxiong in the same ring. Seeing that Li Jiudao had admitted defeat, Qin Sangxiong kept his saber and did not attack again. After the Great Guardian announced the result, the two of them left the ring one after another. Next, the third round of the battle began. Ji Tianqing strode into the array light shield and stood in the middle of the ring. Kuang Long took the burning spirit blood explosion elixir and entered the array light shield aggressively. He flew to the middle of the ring. He and Ji Tianqing were 100 feet apart. They looked at each other coldly. Although he had taken the burning spirit blood explosion elixir, he was in the same situation as Hua Qingyu. The violent effect of the elixir exploded in his body and attacked his primordial spirit. It made him violent and bloodthirsty. However, he did not lose his mind. He could still remain calm. He stared at Ji Tianqing and sneered. He asked in a mocking tone, Ji Tianqing, before the battle, I would like to ask you a question. Are you afraid of death? Many guardians, divine messengers, and geniuses in the square were puzzled and frowning. No one expected Kuang Long to ask such a strange question. Everyone guessed that Ji Tianqing would not answer. Or maybe he was not afraid of a question. However, to everyone's surprise, Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. He then nodded solemnly. Of course, I am afraid. Therefore, those who want me dead will definitely die first. Hearing this answer, everyone in the square showed a strange expression. Many people pondered for a moment before revealing expressions of shock and admiration. This Ji Tianqing really can't be judged by common sense. Interesting. If he says he's not afraid, then he's being hypocritical. But his answer was impeccable, and he was extremely confident and arrogant. You're still as arrogant as ever. Just as everyone was discussing in low voices, Kuang Long spoke again. You've always been arrogant and conceited. I thought you weren't afraid of death. Unfortunately, I'm not afraid of death. As long as I die a worthy death, I will die without hesitation. As he spoke, a murderous aura burst out from his body, and a dark red flame lit up behind him. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned as he saw the clues. There's a violent energy fluctuation in Kuang Long's body, and his combat strength has also increased by several times. Is he in the same situation as Hu Qingyu? Could it be that he also wants to self-destruct and die with me? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Kuang Long had already rushed over like a flash of light, not giving him any time to think. Flying Dragon Claw. Kuang Long leaped into the sky and waved the bronze chain wrapped around his body. Dazzling flames condensed into 6 giant flaming claws that grabbed at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to draw the black dragon sword and counterattack with it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He waved the black dragon sword and slashed out 6 sword radiances at lightning speed toward Kuang Long in the sky. Bam, 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 bam. A series of muffled sounds rang out as the 6 sword radiances collided with the giant claws and exploded at the same time. Kuang Long did not stop. He waved the bronze chain recklessly and smashed it down from the sky. Ji Tianqing put his left hand behind his back and held the black dragon sword in his right hand. He used the stealth step and disappeared instantly. In the next moment, he teleported thousands of feet away, dodged Kuang Long's attack, and slashed at Kuang Long with his sword. Kuang Long had no time to dodge and could only block with the bronze chain. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing rang out. The simple bronze chain was cut apart by the black dragon sword on the spot. Following that, Kuang Long pounced on Ji Tianqing like a madman. He did not care about his own safety at all and fought with his life on the line. Ji Tianqing used the stealth step and his figure flickered continuously in the sky. He was sometimes east, sometimes west, sometimes left, and sometimes right. It was impossible to catch him. Kuang Long attacked wildly for more than 10 times, but he could not even touch the corner of his clothes. On the contrary, he kept attacking with his sword and cut off all 6 of Kuang Long's bronze chains. He even left a few deep bloody grooves on Kuang Long's body. Soon, 10 breaths of time passed. The power of the burning spirit blood explosion pill finally erupted completely. Kuang Long's combat strength increased by 8 times. His entire body swelled violently and his whole body burned with blood-red flames. The extreme pain caused his face to contort. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. He was on the verge of collapse. He no longer fought with Ji Tianqing and decisively used his strongest killing move. Tyrant Dragon rumbles the sky. He roared with a loud voice. Flames surged out of his body and his body transformed into a giant flaming dragon that was 10,000 feet long. This flaming dragon was extremely majestic. Its body was 10,000 feet long and it was like a flaming mountain range. It circled in the sky and waved its 4 dragon claws crazily. In an instant, hundreds of giant flaming claws descended from the sky. Instantly, the arena within a radius of 20,000 feet was sealed by the giant flaming claws. It wanted to destroy the entire arena so that Ji Tianqing had nowhere to hide. Moreover, it had locked onto Ji Tianqing's aura and used its huge dragon head to smash Ji Tianqing. Despite being in such a dangerous situation, Ji Tianqing still managed to remain calm. He could see that Kuang Long was on the verge of self-destruction and was about to lose control. However, he was in the arena and had to think of a way to resist. It was impossible for him to escape the arena. At the critical moment, he did not hesitate to use his primordial spirit golden sword and slashed at the flaming dragon with all his might. Bang! 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 In a series of muffled sounds, the primordial spirit golden sword shattered more than 30 giant flaming claws and slashed at the flaming dragon. The flaming dragon was cut in half by the primordial spirit golden sword and broke into two on the spot. At the same time, dozens of flaming claws slammed into the arena at the same time and drowned Ji Tianqing's figure. Boom! 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 A deafening sound burst out, reverberating endlessly in the sky. The ground within a radius of 20,000 feet was immediately turned into ruins and was enveloped by endless flames. The entire Mount God bestowment was shaken by such a powerful impact. Ji Tianqing's dermic power shield was also shattered. His hair was messy and draped over his shoulders. His face was a little pale. Obviously, he relied on his powerful dermic power and strong physical defense to block the attack of the flaming dragon claws. However, at this moment, the flaming dragon that was broken in two suddenly waved its front claws and shot out a dark and sharp cold light towards Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1614. Soul-Vanquishing Nail. This was Kuang Long's trump card, a mid-grade tribulation-level Dharma treasure. It was the most insidious item. It could pierce through dermic power shields and bodies, directly destroying a warrior's essence soul. Although the soul-vanquishing nail was a mid-grade tribulation-level Dharma treasure like Lan Yiqing's extreme ice sword, it was a Dharma treasure. The extreme ice sword was a Dharma treasure that could be used for long periods of time. The soul-vanquishing nail was a consumable Dharma treasure. It would explode after one use. There was a fundamental difference between the two. Therefore, the soul-vanquishing nail was several times stronger than the extreme ice sword. Kuang Long had once used this insidious Dharma treasure to kill a 9th firmament essence soul realm expert in a sneak attack. He firmly believed that Ji Tianqing was dead for sure. His essence soul would be destroyed by the soul-vanquishing nail. Swoosh! In an instant, the black beam arrived in front of Ji Tianqing and was about to pierce his forehead. At the critical moment, he sensed the impending danger of death, but he remained calm. His eyes were as sharp as lightning as he stared at the incoming black beam. He instantly opened the third eye on his forehead and released an endless amount of purple divine lightning towards the black light. The dazzling purple lightning condensed into a 30-foot-long divine lightning beam. It collided with the cold black beam, producing a thunderous roar. Boom! The cold black beam was instantly drowned by the lightning. It could not withstand the might of the divine lightning beam and was shattered. The half-foot-long soul-vanquishing nail was also sent flying by the terrifying might of the divine lightning. Swoosh! The soul-vanquishing nail flew 10,000 feet away and struck the flaming dragon's tail. Boom! The soul-vanquishing nail exploded, blasting half of the flaming dragon into smithereens and emitting a black beam. Kuang Long was dumbfounded. He only had half of his body left. His massive dragon head was still bulging. His dragon eyes were protruding as he stared at Ji Tianqing. No! How is this possible? He was filled with despair and extreme grief. Originally, he was determined to obtain it and was certain that the spirit-destroying nail could kill Ji Tianqing. Even if he could not kill him, he could severely injure Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing was unharmed. The soul-vanquishing nail flew back and destroyed half of his dragon body. His plan had been half destroyed. The incomparably violent explosive power fiercely battered half of his dragon body. The burning soul blood explosion pill's strength had reached its limits. He could no longer suppress it, and half of his dragon body was about to explode. Gee. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. Let's die together. He let out a hysterical roar and dove down from the sky, pouncing towards Ji Tianqing without a care for anything else. At the same time, the gigantic flaming dragon body exploded with a boom. A deafening explosion resounded through the clouds, shaking the heavens and the earth. Endless flames mixed with dark red blood light exploded like a mushroom cloud, filling the five-colored light shield. It was yet another world-shaking self-detonation that could destroy the heavens and destroy the earth. The entire Mount God bestowment shook violently, and cracks appeared on the walls of the mountain. The geniuses, divine envoys, and protectors on the square were dumbfounded and petrified. Everyone stared at the five-colored light barrier and the surging flames and blood light. Their eyes widened in shock. Oh my God! Are people these days crazy? Hua Qingyu blew himself up, and now Kuang Long blew himself up as well. How stupid are they? It's too terrifying. Both Hua Qingyu and Kuang Long self-destructed in an attempt to perish together with Ji Tianqing. I wonder what kind of sin Ji Tianqing had committed that made Hua Qingyu and Kuang Long willing to die for him. Ji Tianqing was just blasted once, and now he's blasted again. I'm afraid he'll be crippled even if he doesn't die. The people of the Chu Yun Empire are all freaks and lunatics. In the future, don't provoke people from the Chu Yun Empire. They self-destruct at the slightest provocation. It's too scary. The geniuses were inexplicably horrified. Hong Qingtian was full of worry and his heart was in his throat. He was worried about Ji Tianqing's safety. The great protector's face was livid, and his eyes were filled with rage and killing intent. He was completely enraged. Previously, when Hua Qingyu blew himself up, he had sternly warned everyone. He did not expect the same thing to happen to Kuang Long. Such blatant disregard of his warning was an insult to him. If things continued to develop like this, wouldn't his words be taken in one ear and lost all credibility? Most importantly, there were 2 consecutive accidents in this year's God-disciple assessment. If Ji Tianqing was really killed by the explosion, he would be severely punished and the Divine Master blamed him. After a long time, the flames and the five-colored light barrier dissipated. A figure in a white robe appeared on the charred ruins. It was Ji Tianqing. Everyone's gaze was uniformly gathered on him. Other than his pale face and his white robe stained with dust, there were no injuries on his body. On his shoulders, there was a pair of dark golden wings that were shining with a dazzling golden light. Obviously, at the moment when Kuang Long blew himself up, he used the Kenshin battle robe to protect himself with a pair of wings. Although Kuang Long's self-destruction was terrifying, it could not do anything to the golden wings. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The hearts of the Great Guardian and Hong Qingtian finally returned to their stomachs. Ji Tianqing wins this battle. The Great Protector hurriedly announced the result of the battle. After Ji Tianqing left the arena, the Great Protector looked around and shouted coldly and sternly, "In just 2 hours, there were 2 consecutive accidents. I'll repeat what I said before. If anyone dares to use extreme means again, I'll intervene immediately and kill them without asking for any reason." The majestic voice reverberated in the square and shook everyone's hearts. Everyone knew that the Great Protector was truly enraged. The words, "without asking for any reason, kill them without asking for any reason," made everyone's hearts tighten and cold sweat break out on their backs. In fact, before Kuang Long blew himself up, the Great Protector could have stopped him at any time. However, there had always been a rule in God's mountain that the Great Protectors and messengers were not allowed to intervene in the battle of the God-disciple assessment. Before Kuang Long blew himself up, no one was sure whether he was going to blow himself up or use a secret technique to increase his combat power. When the Great Protector realized that he was going to blow himself up, it was too late to stop him. However, it was different now. The Great Protector had spoken and made up his mind. If anyone else was in a similar situation, even if it was just a slight sign, he would intervene to stop them. He would even kill them directly to prevent future troubles. Many geniuses were worried and had to consider the consequences of recklessly using a forbidden secret technique to increase combat power. Hong Qingtian looked at Ji Tianqing with concern and said seriously, "Tianqing, you must have realized that something was wrong with Kuang Long. Why didn't you call me and the Great Protector? If you encounter a similar situation again, you must call me immediately and I'll definitely intervene." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He comforted Hong Qingtian, "Elder Hong, don't worry. Those who want to kill me are either eliminated or dead." Chapter 16-15. Hong Qingtian knew that Ji Tianqing had a blood feud with the Chu Yun Empire. If that was not the case, why would the people of the Chu Yun Empire hate him so much to the extent that they wanted to kill him? Luckily, the geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire had been eliminated. Kuang Long and Hua Qingyu had died. Only Yin Wuke had advanced. He had a good relationship with Ji Tianqing and did not have any grudges with him. Just as Ji Tianqing had said, no one would die with him and such a situation would not happen again. Then, the geniuses went up the stage one by one. After a series of exciting battles between dragons and tigers, the third round of the test ended. The 8 geniuses, including Ji Tianqing, continued to fight for the top 8 positions. Under the orders of the Great Guardian, they rested at the square temporarily. Among the 8 geniuses who had been eliminated, Kuang Long had died. The remaining 7 geniuses still had a chance. They continued to fight for the remaining 2 positions as God disciples. After a series of intense battles, the 2 most powerful geniuses fought their way out of the encirclement. They had successfully changed their destinies and became honorary God disciples. They could continue to cultivate in Mount God. As for the other 5 geniuses, they had been eliminated and could only leave. A few days later, they would be sent to the Glacier Holy Mine. Their future in martial arts would be bleak. When the sun was high in the sky, the 4th round of the examination began. The 8 geniuses, including Ji Tianqing, had to fight for the top 8 positions. Although it was already certain that the 8 of them would become God's disciples, Su Mo was still in a daze. However, only the top 5 geniuses could represent Mount God to participate in the exchange of the 3 holy kingdoms. Everyone had their own ambitions. They all wanted to become a dazzling, top-notch genius. They wanted to be valued by the Divine Master and have a meteoric rise. The Great Guardian waved his hand and threw out 8 jade bamboo slips. He messed up the order and divided them into 4 pairs. He picked up the 4 pairs of jade bamboo slips and read aloud, "The 4th round of the examination begins now. The first round, Yin Wuke vs. Kong Mengqi. The second round, Ji Tianqing vs. Qian Feiyang. The third round, Jiang Ningxue vs. Song Zhanyu. The 4th round, Qin Cangxiong vs." After the Great Guardian finished reading, the 8 geniuses frowned with complicated expressions. Yin Wuke was the first to step onto the stage, standing in the middle of the plaza. His opponent, Kong Mengqi, was the number 1 genius of the Lufeng Empire. His strength was the same as his, at the 6th firmament primordial spirit realm. The 2 of them stood still on the ring. After they bowed to each other, they took out their respective magic treasures and began to fight fiercely. Kong Mengqi wore a fiery red armor and held 2 fiery sabers in his hands. He used the extremely violent heavenly fire saber technique and attacked fiercely. Wu Kei was still the same as before. His aura was soft and gentle. Even his cultivation technique was more gentle. Yin and Yang complemented each other, making him unpredictable. However, the Tao of Yin and Yang contained the principles of the heavens, and was the most profound of all. No matter how ferocious Kong Mengqi's attacks were, he could block them with the help of the yin and yang umbrella. The two of them exchanged more than 100 moves, and Kong Mengqi was unable to gain the upper hand. His mana was greatly depleted, and his momentum was weakened. Yin Wuke was still not in a hurry. He was not anxious at all. He advanced and retreated in an orderly manner, as if he had an endless amount of mana. Such an outcome made everyone feel incredulous. Only Yin Wuke and Ji Tianqing knew that this was the special characteristic of the yin-yang limitless technique. Yin and yang complemented each other, and the mana was inexhaustible. It was because of this that this technique could be called a peerless divine technique. Very quickly, 15 minutes passed. Yin Wuke and Kong Mengqi exchanged a few hundred moves before the victor was finally decided. Kong Mengqi's mana was greatly depleted, and his body was covered in wounds. He was suppressed by Yin Wuke's yin-yang wheel and could no longer resist. After the Great Guardian announced the outcome of the battle, Yin Wuke removed the yin-yang wheel and kept the yin and yang umbrella. He thanked Kong Mengqi and left the ring with a smile on his face. Kong Mengqi crawled up pathetically. He muttered a few words unwillingly before walking down the ring with a gloomy expression. The second battle began. Ji Tianqing went up the ring and stood still in the middle of the ring. Coincidentally, his opponent was Qian Feiyang. Qian Feiyang walked into the ring with a gloomy expression. He stood a few hundred feet away from Ling Xian and said coldly, "Ji Tianqing, I didn't think that we would have to fight again. For the past 3 months, I have been training day and night just to wash away the humiliation from before. I will not be defeated by the same person twice." His tone was full of confidence, and his bright eyes were also full of anticipation. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said emotionlessly, "Your life has been so rough. I really pity you. 3 months ago, you lost to me. Today, you will lose to me as well. There will be no miracles." Seeing Ji Tianqing acting so frivolous and arrogant, Qian Feiyang felt as if he had been greatly humiliated. His eyes flashed with a cold light as he shouted in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing, cut the crap. I'll show you my power." As he shouted, a golden light flashed in his hands, and a 2-meter-long golden spear appeared. With the coiling dragon spear in his hand, his entire body exuded a strong fighting spirit. His aura also reached its peak. Outer Sky Dragon. Holding the coiling dragon spear with both hands, he leaped into the sky and stabbed at Ji Tianqing with both hands. Suddenly, a 300-meter-long golden dragon appeared in the sky and swooped down at Ji Tianqing with the power to destroy the world. Back then, when he challenged Ji Tianqing, he had used this spear technique. After 3 months, he used this spear technique again, and its power had increased by 3 times. It was obvious that his diligent training in the past 3 months had produced remarkable results, and his strength had also greatly improved. However, Ji Tianqing still looked calm and said confidently, "When you challenged me, I beat you in 3 moves. Now, I don't need 3 moves. 2 moves are enough." When he finished speaking, the golden dragon that descended from the sky had already swooped down on top of his head. He immediately waved the black dragon sword and unleashed 80% of his strength, slashing out a sword light as fast as lightning. Broken Moon Sword. The 300-meter-long sword light tore through the sky like a waterfall and instantly slashed at the golden dragon. Kaboom! A thunderous sound exploded. The golden dragon collapsed on the spot and exploded into pieces that covered the sky and earth, scattering all over the arena. The terrifying Broken Moon Sword's power did not diminish as it slashed at Qian Feiyang in the distance. Bang! Qian Feiyang sensed that something was wrong and held the coiling dragon spear in front of him to block the sword light. However, he could not withstand the terrifying power and was sent flying with his spear, crashing into the 5-colored light barrier. Pfft! When he landed pathetically, his face was as pale as a sheet and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Ji Tianqing only used 1 move to injure him. No. This is impossible. His eyes were wide open as he roared in disbelief. Meteor fiery dragon spear. He roared and used his strongest killing move without caring about anything else. He turned into a dazzling golden light and merged with the coiling dragon spear as he flew into the sky. Chapter 16:16. The coiling dragon spear fell from the sky like a meteor, dazzling and resplendent. The power contained within seemed to be able to destroy the heavens and earth, penetrating everything. Even the sky could be pierced through by the spear. There was nothing that could block this unstoppable spear. Everyone in the square stared at this scene unblinkingly, their hearts in their mouths. The geniuses thought to themselves that if they were Ji Tianqing, they would also not be able to dodge. They would only be able to block with all their might. However, a scene that shocked everyone appeared. Ji Tianqing faced the coiling dragon spear fearlessly, without any intention of dodging or resisting. He formed a sword seal with his left hand, and his right hand emitted a white light as he slashed at the coiling dragon spear. Cold sea. With a slash of the sword, the sea turned cold. In that instant, a snow-white sword light that was 100 feet long tore through the sky. The sword light carried a terrifying chill as it slashed at the coiling dragon spear. Kaboom! In an earth-shattering explosion, the coiling dragon spear that was shining with golden light was shattered on the spot, turning into hundreds of fragments that scattered in all directions. Qian Feiyang's Dharma treasure, the coiling dragon spear, was destroyed by Ji Tianqing with a single slash. Among the golden fragments that blotted out the sky, there was a figure that rolled and smashed into a corner of the square. Plop! After that figure landed, he rolled a few times in a sorry state before stopping, but he could not get up no matter what. Everyone's eyes were gathered on that figure. Without a doubt, that person was Qian Feiyang. His hair was disheveled as he lay on the ground, blood gushing out of his nose and mouth. There was also a long and narrow wound on his chest. His body twitched as his eyes opened and closed continuously. He was in a daze and was on the verge of losing consciousness. His physical injuries were not serious. What really made him lose his ability to fight was the injury to his primordial spirit. After 2 moves, Ji Tianqing put away the black dragon sword and no longer attacked. Just as he said, he did not need 3 moves to defeat Qian Feiyang. 2 moves were enough. The crowd was in an uproar. The 8 young geniuses and the 6 divine envoys all had expressions of disbelief as they stared at Ji Tianqing with their mouths agape. No one dared to believe that Ji Tianqing really only used 2 moves to severely injure Qian Feiyang. Such a powerful combat strength was simply terrifying. Previously, when he said that he would defeat Qian Feiyang in 2 moves, everyone secretly criticized him, thinking that he was too confident and arrogant. Now, the truth was right in front of their eyes. Who wouldn't believe it? Jiang Ningxue furrowed her brows with a solemn expression. She thought to herself, this guy hasn't fought for 3 months, and he's already this strong? Song Zhanyu stared at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes and murmured in shock, even Qin Sangqiong might not be able to do that, right? Qin Sangqiong also stared at Ji Tianqing. His eyes were cold and his nerves were tense. A thought flashed through his mind. If there's anyone who can defeat me and take away the honor of being the #1 genius, that person will definitely be him. He had a strong premonition that Ji Tianqing was his strongest opponent. At this moment, the Great Guardian announced the results loudly. Ji Tianqing wins this battle. As his voice fell, Ji Tianqing turned and walked out of the ring. Several golden armored guards stepped into the arena and carried the unconscious Qian Feiyang off. The assessment continued. Jiang Ningxue and Song Zhanyu entered the arena at the same time. After greeting each other, a fierce battle began. Both of their strengths were on par with each other. The battle was exceptionally intense, but it was hard to tell who would win. Within a short period of time, it was hard to tell who would win. They exchanged more than 1,000 moves and fought for 30 minutes before the outcome was decided. The result was as expected. Jiang Ningxue lost to Song Zhanyu by 1 move. Song Zhanyu left the arena calmly without any joy of winning. After all, this was the result that was expected. Jiang Ningxue looked a little embarrassed and her eyes were dim. She lowered her head and left the arena quietly. She returned to the edge of the square and stood still. She did not even have the courage to look at Ji Tianqing. She recalled the oath that she had made back then and felt her cheeks burning. She could only laugh bitterly at herself. Back then, I even swore that I would defeat Ji Tianqing in the assessment and let him see me in a new light. I would then wash away my shame. I didn't expect that I wouldn't even have the chance to fight with him. Ha ha ha. After a while, the 4th battle began. Qin Sangqiong and a young genius entered the arena. There was no suspense in this battle. The young genius was defeated by Qin Sangqiong after just over 100 moves. The 4th round of the assessment had ended. Ji Tianqing, Qin Sangqiong, Song Zhanyu and Wuxia had advanced to the next round and were resting at the edge of the square. Jiang Ningxue, Qian Feiyang, Kong Mengqi and the rest continued to fight for the 5th to 8th place. After 2 rounds of fighting, the results of the ranking were out quickly. Jiang Ningxue was the most powerful among the 4 of them. She had won the 5th place without any suspense and was qualified to participate in the Kingdom Exchange meet. Qian Feiyang was severely injured and unconscious. He could not fight and was ranked 8th. The results of the ranking made the crowd sigh with emotion. 3 months ago, Qian Feiyang was ranked 4th. He would definitely be able to participate in the Kingdom Exchange meet. I didn't expect, sigh. Speaking of which, this guy is really unlucky. His fate is too rough. Yeah. Who asked him to meet Ji Tianqing? He was severely injured and unconscious during the assessment and ended up ranked 8th. Within 3 months, he went from 4th place to 8th place. What a tragedy. A few of the geniuses and God's messengers discussed among themselves and sympathized with Qian Feiyang. Next, the 5th round of the assessment began. Ji Tianqing, Qin Sangqiong and the other 3 were going to fight for the 1st to 4th place. The rules of the assessment had changed. They did not need to draw lots. Each of them had to fight with 3 opponents. The first one to challenge was Wuxia. He looked at Ji Tianqing playfully and turned to the head guardian. The first battle, I would like to challenge Ji Tianqing. The head guardian nodded in agreement and was about to let the 2 of them fight. Unexpectedly, Wuxia added another sentence. However, I choose to admit defeat. The head guardian was stunned for a moment. He did not say anything and announced the result. Next, Wuxia challenged Song Zhanyu. This time, he did not admit defeat. Instead, he used all his strength to fight with Song Zhanyu. The result was obvious. After exchanging more than 200 moves with Song Zhanyu, he finally could not take it anymore. He was severely injured and had to admit defeat. Song Zhanyu did not have it easy either. He had used up a lot of his spiritual energy and his body was covered with wounds. Everyone was shocked by Wuxia's performance. They found it unbelievable. 3 months ago, he was just a passerby among the geniuses. He was ordinary and not many people paid attention to him. Now, he was able to fight with Song Zhanyu. Although he had lost, it was a glorious defeat. For the 3rd battle, he had to challenge Qin Sangqiong. However, he knew his place and chose to admit defeat. The head guardian announced that Wuxia had lost all 3 battles and was ranked 4th. At first, it sounded humiliating to lose all 3 battles. Chapter 16-17. The 4th place had been confirmed. Next, Ji Tianqing, Song Zhanyu, and Qin Sangqiong would fight for the top 3 places. Everyone in the square stared at them intently, looking forward to the final result. Everyone knew that the most exciting fight was about to begin. Ji Tianqing stepped into the colorful light shield and stood still in the fighting ring. He looked calmly at Song Zhanyu and said, "For the sake of fairness, I can give you an hour to adjust your breathing." What he had done was indeed open and aboveboard, which made everyone respect him. Song Zhanyu frowned and said coldly, "Humph. No need, I'm not that useless Qian Feiyang." Having said that, he stepped into the fighting ring. Ji Tianqing was not angry at being rejected. He said calmly, "If that's the case, let's end this quickly. Qin Sangqiong is still waiting for us." Song Zhanyu's eyebrows twitched and the anger in his eyes intensified. "Ji Tianqing. You're too arrogant. Do you think only Qin Sangqiong is worthy of being your opponent? Today, I'll defeat you in front of everyone and crush your arrogance." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said calmly, "No, you're wrong. You and Qin Sangqiong are not worthy of being my opponents." His tone was calm and indifferent, as if he was stating a fact. That was the truth. Only those who were at the crossing calamity realm were worthy of being his opponents. He was invincible among those who were below the crossing calamity realm. However, Song Zhanyu, Qin Sangqiong, and everyone else were shocked by what he had said. The geniuses and the 6 divine messengers were shocked by his arrogance. Qin Sangqiong frowned and a cold light flashed across his eyes. His body was filled with fighting spirit. Song Zhanyu was furious. He sneered and said, "I don't know how powerful you are. However, your confidence and arrogance are unrivaled." "Confidence?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and smiled. "You can think whatever you want, as long as you're happy." He had an indifferent attitude, completely ignoring Song Zhanyu's opinion and words. However, it was precisely because of this that Song Zhanyu felt disregarded and felt even more ashamed and resentful. "Ji Tianqing, you." He pulled out a treasured sword, and a violent aura gushed out from his body as he shouted in a cold tone. However, before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Ji Tianqing. "You talk too much." As his voice rang out, Ji Tianqing had already attacked with lightning speed. Swish! He used the divine concealment step and instantly disappeared into the sky. In the next moment, he appeared above Song Zhanyu's head and slashed down with his sword. Heaven-cleaving sword. The black dragon sword emitted a dazzling golden light, condensing into an incomparably sharp golden sword, slashing down like a bolt of lightning. Song Zhanyu's expression changed, and he immediately brandished his sword to block the attack, slashing out a dozen huge sword lights. Clang! 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 In a series of collision sounds, the dozen sword lights were shattered and exploded. Song Zhanyu was also knocked back hundreds of meters, and his feet drew 2 deep trenches in the ground. His face was pale, and his arms were numb. The treasured sword in his hand was also trembling non-stop, letting out a mournful cry. "Damn it! How can you be so powerful?" He cursed in a low voice and immediately unleashed his full power, swinging his sword and using his trump card. Sword dance in the sky. Suddenly, his body lit up with a white light that shot into the sky. He merged with his treasured sword and flew into the sky. The 30-meter-tall giant sword spun rapidly like a tornado, bursting out thousands of sword lights. Swish! 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 The sharp sword lights rained down like a rain of arrows, attacking Ji Tianqing. Within the 5-colored light barrier, the area within a radius of 2,000 meters was filled with thousands of sword lights, leaving no place to hide. However, Ji Tianqing did not dodge. He held the black dragon sword with both hands and slashed at the hurricane formed by the sword lights. Broken Moon Sword. The black dragon sword burst out with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a giant sword that was hundreds of meters long. It shattered countless sword lights along the way and slashed at the sword hurricane. No matter how exquisite Song Jianyu's sword technique was, no matter how fancy and pleasing to the eye it looked, Ji Tianqing had only used one sword to break it, and his strength was enough to defeat 10. Kaboom! With a thunderous explosion, the dazzling sword hurricane was shattered on the spot by the golden sword. Hundreds of millions of sword light fragments fell like goose feathers, sprinkling on the ruined arena. Song Jianyu's figure flew backward, slamming into the five-colored light barrier, and fell into the ruins. When he landed, his hair was messy, his black robe was tattered, and blood was gushing out of his nose and mouth. On his chest, there was a sword wound that was so deep that his bones could be seen. Obviously, the black dragon sword had broken through the defense of the armor he was wearing, and a crack had appeared on it. Pfft! Song Jianyu opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Ji Tianqing with misty eyes and roared in a low voice, "You! I won't lose. Never!" Full of anger and indignation, he burst out with infinite potential, burning with golden flames all over his body. He rushed into the sky again, waved his sword with both hands, and used his ultimate skill to attack Ji Tianqing. Ultimate tyrannical sovereign sword. He roared and used all his power to condense a five-colored giant sword that was hundreds of meters long, and slashed at Ji Tianqing. This sword was extremely domineering and powerful to the extreme. This was his strongest sword, unstoppable. Ji Tianqing was still expressionless. With his left hand behind his back, he waved the black dragon sword with his right hand and slashed out a dazzling sword light. Swing! A white sword light that was hundreds of meters long, like a crescent moon, appeared in the sky and swept toward Song Jianyu. Bang! The two sword lights collided with a loud bang that shook the sky and spread throughout the peak of Mount Godseal. The five-colored giant sword collapsed on the spot, exploding into dazzling lights that filled the entire arena. The dazzling white crescent sword light did not lose its power and slashed at Song Jianyu. He was sent flying, and a hideous wound appeared on his chest. Blood splattered everywhere. Then, he crashed into the five-colored light barrier and fell to the ground. When he stood up from the ruins, his hair was disheveled, and his body was covered in blood. He was in a sorry state. Before he could regain his composure, a pitch-black, ice-cold sword was placed against his neck. "You are indeed stronger than Qian Feiyang. He only lasted 2 moves, but you lasted until the 3rd. A calm and indifferent voice sounded beside him. As soon as he raised his head, he saw Ji Tianqing's calm face looking down at him from above. Without a doubt, he had lost. Ji Tianqing's words sounded like a compliment. But he only felt shame and anger in his heart. At this moment, the dust on the arena had dispersed, and everything returned to normal. When the crowd saw what had happened in the arena, they were stunned and could not believe their eyes. Ji Tianqing and Song Jianyu had only exchanged 3 moves, and Song Jianyu was severely injured and defeated. This was unbelievable. Song Jianyu was the second genius after Qin Sangqiong. At this thought, the crowd could not help but have a thought. Could Qin Sangqiong defeat Ji Tianqing? Chapter 16-18. When this thought appeared in everyone's mind, they realized that there was a problem. Ji Tianqing had created a series of miracles. Unknowingly, he had left an impression on everyone that he was invincible. In the past, no one had thought that he could be compared to Qin Sangqiong. But now, he seemed to have surpassed Qin Sangqiong. Everyone had always thought that Qin Sangqiong was the #1 genius. However, for the past 6 months, no one had seen Qin Sangqiong fight. On the other hand, Ji Tianqing had fought a few times, and each time, he was more powerful than the last. His strength was unbelievable. After comparing the two of them, everyone felt that Ji Tianqing was more powerful. Of course, since the two of them had not really fought, no one could be sure of the result. Everyone was looking forward to seeing Qin Zhangxiong fight with Ji Tianqing. Qin Zhangxiong finally stepped into the fighting ring as everyone looked at him with anticipation. He was wearing a gray linen shirt and a pair of black cloth shoes. He held the Zhangxiong sword in his arms and stood proudly in the middle of the fighting ring. Everyone thought that he would challenge Ji Tianqing and have a fight with Ji Tianqing. However, to everyone's surprise, he looked at Song Zhanyu calmly and asked, "Song Zhanyu, can you still hold on?" He had challenged Song Zhanyu first. Song Zhanyu also did not expect this result. He was stunned on the spot, and his expression became very ugly. His eyes surged with anger. Damn it! Previously, Yin Wuke challenged me. Then, Ji Tianqing challenged me. Now that I am severely injured, even Qin Zhangxiong wants to challenge me. If he accepted Qin Zhangxiong's challenge, he would have to fight 3 rounds in a row and he would not be able to take a breather. His powers were depleted and he was severely injured. If he were to fight with Qin Zhangxiong, he would definitely lose. If he did not accept Qin Zhangxiong's challenge, he would be giving up and losing face. At that moment, he was in a dilemma as he weighed the pros and cons in silence. The few guardians, divine messengers and geniuses were waiting quietly. No one objected to Qin Zhangxiong's decision and they understood what he meant. He clearly wanted to exclude Song Zhanyu and compete with Ji Tianqing for the honor of being the #1 genius. Everyone's eyes were bright. Of course, they could tell that Song Zhanyu was weaker than Ji Tianqing and Qin Zhangxiong. He could only be ranked 3rd. This was the truth. No matter how angry and unwilling Song Zhanyu was, it could not be changed. 10 breaths of time passed. After careful consideration, Song Zhanyu finally decided to forfeit and admit defeat. I admit defeat. He lowered his head, expressionless, and said these 3 words in a low voice. Everyone in the square had long expected this result and did not feel surprised. Although Song Zhanyu directly admitted defeat, which was slightly incompetent and humiliating. But this was the wisest course of action. Even if he endured his injuries and fought with Qin Zhangxiong, he would still lose in the end and his injuries would be even worse. The Great Guardian announced the result loudly, Qin Zhangxiong wins this battle. Song Zhanyu was ranked 3rd. In the last round, Ji Tianqing will fight against Qin Zhangxiong for the 1st place. As his majestic voice fell, Ji Tianqing stepped into the colorful light shield. He looked calm as he walked to the middle of the arena and stopped 100 feet away from Qin Zhangxiong. The two of them faced each other in the arena. Vast amounts of energy were accumulating in their bodies and they were filled with a strong fighting spirit. Ji Tianqing, I have been waiting for this day for half a year. Qin Zhangxiong held the Zhangxiong saber in his arms and looked sharply at Ji Tianqing. He said in a serious tone, "Before I met you, I looked down on the geniuses from various countries and no one was worthy of my attention. It was only when you appeared that my fighting spirit were ignited. Today, you and I will have a duel at the peak of God Bestowment Mountain, in front of everyone here, and we will decide who is stronger." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows as the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. "You think quite highly of me. Unfortunately, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." "What do you mean?" Qin Zhangxiong frowned and his eyes turned cold. The smile on Ji Tianqing's face grew more and more playful. He said meaningfully, "You see me as your #1 enemy, but I don't. I am just wondering how many moves you can take from my sword." Qin Zhangxiong frowned and his cheeks twitched. He said coldly, "Ji Tianqing, I admit that you are strong. However, you are too arrogant and you do not know your place." Ji Tianqing smiled and said calmly, "I am just stating a fact. You think I am arrogant because you are ignorant." Qin Sangxiong's eyes were filled with coldness. He slowly drew out the Sangxiong saber and his body lit up with dazzling flames. Ji Tianqing, if you are trying to provoke me with such an inferior method, you have underestimated me. In his opinion, Ji Tianqing was deliberately provoking him so that he would not be able to unleash his strongest combat strength. However, Ji Tianqing did not want to talk nonsense with him. He said firmly, "You will definitely lose within 10 moves." Arrogant! Qin Sangxiong shouted and jumped into the sky. He held the Sangxiong saber with both hands and slashed down. Sky-splitting feather saber. The pitch-black Sangxiong saber gave off a dazzling golden light and slashed out 49 rays of saber radiance that were 100 feet long. Each ray of golden saber radiance contained a powerful force that could destroy everything. It was more dazzling than the sun. The 49 rays of saber radiance were arranged according to a special pattern and formed a mysterious saber array. It activated the power of heaven and earth and slashed down on Ji Tianqing from the sky. Suddenly, the entire arena was sealed by the saber radiance. The invisible divine power of 10,000 miles of heaven and earth firmly suppressed Ji Tianqing, making it impossible for him to escape. At this moment, Qin Sangxiong's body was majestic. He gave off a holy and majestic aura as if he was the god of war. When the great guardian, Hong Chengtian, and a few divine messengers saw this, they were shocked and started to whisper to each other. "It is the heavenly saber. Qin Sangxiong has indeed mastered this tribulation secret skill. Qin Sangxiong is indeed the top genius. With the strength of the primordial soul realm, he managed to master this saber skill in just 1 month. This is unbelievable. I did not expect him to use the heavenly saber in his first move. It seems like he really sees Ji Tianqing as his #1 opponent. Qin Sangxiong's saber skill has reached the small completion realm. It is very powerful. Ji Tianqing is in trouble." Everyone was staring at the arena and they were eager to see how Ji Tianqing would get out of this predicament. To everyone's surprise, Ji Tianqing looked calm as if he did not feel threatened at all. Not only did he not dodge or block, but he also took out the black dragon sword and attacked directly. "Draw your sword!" he shouted. Golden light surged out of his body and he pulled out the black dragon sword. The sword radiance flashed. A giant golden sword that was 100 feet long exploded with a destructive force and slashed toward Qin Sangxiong in the sky. Bang! 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 The giant golden sword collided with the dozen rays of saber radiance. The entire arena had turned into a world of golden light. Chapter 16-19. After a long while, the golden radiance that covered the sky finally dissipated. The 49 golden saber radiance and the giant golden sword had all collapsed. Ji Tianqing and Qin Sangxiong had fought each other head-on. They were evenly matched and neither of them had gained the upper hand. Qin Sangxiong stood in the sky and looked down at Ji Tianqing with a cold smile. "You are just so. I have overestimated you." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said calmly, "It was just the first move. I only used 70% of my strength." Qin Sangxiong frowned and the veins on his forehead bulged. He looked terrible. "Humph. Even so, you will not be able to defeat me in 10 moves. I will never be defeated by you. I will be the #1 genius." He shouted angrily and swung his firmament saber for the second time with all his strength. 7 suns dazzling firmament. The firmament saber emitted a dazzling flame that covered the sky. 7 giant sabers that were hundreds of feet long appeared from the flame and slashed toward Ji Tianqing in a crisscross pattern. The 7 giant sabers were arranged in the position of the 7 stars. They contained the mysteries of the stars and attracted the power of the stars. They were more dazzling than the sun. Kill! Following Qin Zhangxiong's furious roar, 7 giant flaming blades slashed down and shrouded Ji Tianqing's figure. Ji Tianqing was fearless. He flew up into the sky and swung his black dragon sword to counter the attack. 7 Stars Sword. He swung his black dragon sword and slashed out 7 giant golden swords. Each golden sword radiance was surrounded by dazzling purple thunderbolts. They were extremely powerful. Bang! 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 The 7 sword radiance and the 7 saber radiance collided and created a deafening sound. Once again, the flame and the golden light shards filled the entire light shield and turned the arena into a chaotic area. The saber radiance and the sword radiance collapsed at the same time. Both of them were hit by the raging shockwave. Qin Zhangxiong flew backward for thousands of feet and crashed into the 5-colored light shield. He fell to the ground with a pale face and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianqing retreated 1,000 feet away. Then, he stopped and stood firmly in the sky. His expression was normal, and his aura was still stable. It was obvious that Qin Zhangxiong was at a disadvantage in the second exchange and his internal organs were injured. Ji Tianqing's physical defense was even stronger. He blocked the power of the shockwave and remained unscathed. The protectors, god envoys, and geniuses shuddered upon seeing this. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Oh my god! Ji Tianqing is actually unscathed? Qin Zhangxiong is injured? They have only exchanged 2 moves. Ji Tianqing's strength is actually so strong. Although Qin Zhangxiong is only slightly injured, his strength is obviously not as good as Ji Tianqing's. I'm afraid the situation is not optimistic. Just as the crowd was discussing this, another fierce fight broke out in the arena. Ji Tianqing took the initiative to attack. He held the black dragon sword with both hands and slashed at Qin Zhangxiong. Broken Moon Sword. He exerted all his strength and slashed out a 2,000 feet long giant golden sword. Along with the raging holy thunder, the sword slashed toward Qin Zhangxiong. The sword slashed across the sky and dazzled with golden light and thunder. Its power was so terrifying that it seemed to be able to tear the sky and cut the sun and moon in half. Without the protection of the 5-colored light shield, the entire Mount God bestowment would have been slashed apart by the sword. Qin Zhangxiong frowned and his eyes became extremely solemn. He felt the threat of death and had to fight with all his strength and caution. Fantasy space-shattering blade. He shouted angrily. He held the Zhangxiong sword with both hands and slashed out a 1,000-meter-long giant golden blade toward Ji Tianqing. This was only the 3rd exchange of blows between the two. For his dignity, he could only choose to fight head-on. He could not dodge or block the attack. The pride of a genius made him unable to admit that he was not as good as Ji Tianqing. Kaboom! The saber radiance and the sword radiance collided and exploded with a thunderous sound. Suddenly, the loud sound echoed throughout the peak of Mount God bestowment. The terrifying shockwave shook the entire mountain. The 5-colored light shield also shook violently and rippled. The saber radiance and the sword radiance shattered at the same time and turned into billions of golden light shards. They hit the ground and the 5-colored light shield. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky unscathed and was pushed back 200 steps by the shock wave. Qin Zhangxiong was sent flying again. He crashed into the 5-colored light shield and fell to the edge of the square. When he got up from the ground, his hair was disheveled and his face was as pale as a sheet. Puff, he spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered. The primordial spirit in his body fluctuated violently and became very disordered. What was worse was that his long robe and hair were charred and tattered by the thunder. Black smoke kept coming out of his head. A strong sense of defeat and humiliation surged into his heart, causing his entire body to tremble, and his eyes to be filled with a layer of blood. Ji Tianqing. You are indeed the son of the oracle. No matter how angry and humiliated Qin Sangxiong was, he had to admit that Ji Tianqing was really powerful. From the start of their fight until now, it had always been an open and above-board confrontation. He could not defeat Ji Tianqing and was severely injured. However, he accepted it wholeheartedly and had no complaints. At the edge of the square, the guardians, messengers and geniuses were shocked and could not believe what they had seen. Qin Sangxiong is injured again? How can he be so severely injured? This is unbelievable. Ji Tianqing is unscathed but Qin Sangxiong is severely injured? It seems like there is no suspense in the outcome. Qin Sangxiong is definitely going to lose. I did not expect Ji Tianqing to grow so quickly. Half a year ago, he was only at LV5 Primordial Spirit Realm. Now, he is already at LV7 Primordial Spirit Realm. Within half a year, he has risen by 2 cultivation realms. This speed is really shocking and unprecedented. In terms of suspense, Qin Sangxiong is most likely going to lose. Now, I am only concerned about whether he can withstand 10 moves. That's right. Although Ji Tianqing is arrogant, everything he said has come true. Previously, when he said that he could defeat Qin Sangxiong within 10 moves, everyone thought that he was too arrogant. Now, I believe him. Just as the crowd was discussing, Ji Tianqing, who was in the ring, spoke. He looked at Qin Sangxiong and said calmly, "The outcome has been decided. You should admit defeat." Qin Sangxiong was stunned for a moment before he burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. Ji Tianqing, you are so arrogant that I am speechless. However, don't even think about it. No matter how weak I am, I will not be defeated within 10 moves and I will not admit defeat. His loud and clear laughter contained a strong sense of desolation and unyieldingness. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "So what if you can withstand 10 moves? By then, your injuries will be more serious and it will affect the future kingdom's exchange. Why do you have to do this?" As soon as he said this, the 2 guardians and the 6 divine envoys all nodded in agreement. No matter who won first place, Ji Tianqing or Qin Sangxiong, they could accept it. What they were most concerned about was the upcoming exchange between the 3 divine kingdoms. Chapter 1620. The Great Guardian, Hongqing Tian, and the 6 divine messengers felt that there was no need to continue the fight. The situation was clear. Qin Sangxiong was no match for Ji Tianqing. There was no point in continuing the fight as it would not change the outcome. Instead, it would worsen Qin Sangxiong's injuries. If it affected the upcoming kingdom exchange meet, it would be a loss for the vast kingdom. Many geniuses understood this. However, how could Qin Sangxiong admit defeat? He flipped his left hand and took out a wine gourd. He tilted his head back and gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. The wine that flowed out of the 1,000 gourd was light yellow in color and it exuded a strong and violent spiritual qi. After 3 mouthfuls of wine, Qin Sangxiong put away the 1,000 gourd. His face was flushed and his eyes were blurred. The spiritual qi in his body surged and the wine turned into a violent spiritual power that flowed through his body. Soon after, his skin turned red and a faint golden light shone from the top of his head. His injuries were healing rapidly and his combat strength was increasing rapidly. Ji Tianqing. Do you think you've won? Impossible. Now, I'll show you my real trump card. Qin Sangxiong wiped the wine off the corner of his mouth with his sleeve. He formed a spiritual art with his left hand and held the firmament saber with his right hand. Swoosh! 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 His body became blurry and illusory. He merged with the firmament saber and disappeared. Drunken dance of 1,000 illusions, shattering the firmament saber. Qin Sangxiong's voice was heard from the golden firmament saber that covered the sky. It was powerful and domineering. In the next moment, tens of thousands of sharp golden firmament sabers formed a tight formation and fell from the sky. The entire fighting ring turned into a world of golden light. Ji Tianqing's body was instantly drowned in the golden light. Seeing this, the great guardian, Hongqing Tian, and the rest of the geniuses were shocked. What saber skill is this? It looks like the firmament saber, but it doesn't look like it. I get it now. This is indeed the firmament saber secret skill. However, Qin Sangxiong has added his own understanding and changed it. Is that so? This is incredible. Qin Sangxiong could master a tribulation-level mystic technique within a month. He could even add his own insights into it and improve it. He's a genius that only appears once in 100 years. To be fair, Qin Sangxiong is indeed one of the top geniuses in the past 100 years. Unfortunately, his luck was not good. He actually met Ji Tianqing, this monster. Just as the crowd was discussing, Ji Tianqing, who was in the ring, began his counterattack. Heaven-splitting sword. He gripped the black dragon sword with both hands as his entire body radiated with dazzling golden light. He slashed out a massive sword over 10,000 feet in length with an invincible stance. The giant dark golden sword was surrounded by dense bolts of divine lightning, and it exploded with a power that could destroy the heavens and earth. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst the deafening noise, the giant golden sword shattered the countless saber lights as if they were dried twigs. The great array formed by tens of thousands of light blades was actually shattered by the giant sword. It collapsed into billions of pieces and scattered in the sky. Qin Sangxiong, who had disappeared, was forced to reveal his original form. He was hit by the giant sword and flew out with blood gushing out of his body. Bam! He crashed into the colorful light shield at the corner of the square and fell to the ground. He rolled a few times before coming to a stop. Then, the golden light shards that covered the sky and covered the earth fell to the ground and dissipated. Qin Sangxiong's modified Heavenly Blade ultimate skill still could not hurt Ji Tianqing. Instead, it was defeated by him. He was completely defeated. He lay on the ground, twitching. Blood gushed out of his body like a fountain and dyed his clothes and hair. His left arm was almost chopped off. There was a long and narrow wound on his chest and abdomen. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. His primordial spirit, in particular, was severely injured and his consciousness was somewhat muddled. Ji Tianqing held the black dragon sword in his hand and stood in the sky calmly. He did not continue to attack. Qin Sangxiong, stop resisting stubbornly. It's meaningless. The great guardian, Hongqing Tian, and a few divine messengers also tried to persuade him. Qin Sangxiong, you are severely injured. Don't force yourself. Just admit defeat. No matter who gets first place, you will have to participate in the Holy Kingdom exchange meet soon and win glory for the vast Holy Kingdom. Qin Sangxiong, if you continue to be stubborn, your injuries will only worsen. You will not be able to recover in 3 to 5 months. By then, it will affect the Holy Kingdom exchange meet. A real genius will not care about temporary gains and losses. Qin Sangxiong, you have to look further. The exchange meet between the 3 holy kingdoms is the best opportunity to make a name for yourself. Everyone tried to persuade Qin Sangxiong to stop his meaningless resistance. However, he ignored everyone's persuasion. He supported himself with the heavenly blade and staggered to his feet. He wiped the blood off his face with his sleeve and looked at Ji Tianqing with determination. He said in a hoarse and low voice, Ji Tianqing. As a martial artist, we must not only be arrogant, but we must also be unyielding. Even if I am not as skilled as you and will definitely be defeated by your sword, I will survive 10 moves. Qin Sangxiong put his left hand behind his back and raised the heavenly blade with his right hand. He pointed it at Ji Tianqing and shouted in a deep voice. "Bring it on. Let me see how you are going to defeat me in 10 moves." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body lit up with a dazzling golden light. It condensed into a dark golden shield that protected him. Apparently, he had made up his mind to not fight Ji Tianqing head-on. He would defend himself with all his might and survive 10 moves no matter what. Even if he knew that he would lose with dignity. Ji Tianqing took a deep look at him and said with a calm tone, "Although you're stubborn, you're not as annoying as I thought. Since you insist on fighting, I will fulfill your wish." As he spoke, he held the black dragon sword in his right hand and performed a unique sword skill with all his might. The 5th move, Black Dragon Shines. He activated a vast amount of spiritual power and poured it into the black dragon sword. He then slashed at Qin Sangqiong. At that moment, the black dragon sword flew out of his hand and turned into a huge black sword that was thousands of feet long. It fell from the sky and slashed at Qin Sangqiong. A vast and holy aura that could suppress the heavens and the earth burst out from the black dragon sword and suppressed Qin Sangqiong. Qin Sangqiong felt the terrifying suppressive force and his face turned pale. At the critical moment, he held the heavenly blade with both hands and slashed out 4 huge light blades to block the sky above his head. Bam! 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 In the blink of an eye, the giant pitch-black sword that was thousands of feet long shattered the 4 light blades. Next, the huge sword shone brightly and let out a dragon's roar that shook the 9 heavens. Roar! Following the dragon's roar, the huge black sword shook its body and turned into a majestic black dragon that was thousands of feet long. The majestic black dragon was covered with dragon scales and shone with a cold light. It stared at Qin Sangqiong and stretched out 2 huge dragon claws to attack him from the sky. Kaboom! Chapter 1621. At that moment, everyone was dumbfounded. Everyone stared intently at the majestic and mighty black dragon in the sky above the arena. Their faces were filled with shock. No one dared to believe that Ji Tianqing's sword technique could create a lifelike divine dragon. Everyone thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. The few young geniuses subconsciously believed that the black dragon was just a shadow. However, the chief enforcer, Hongcheng Tian, and the 6 divine messengers could clearly sense that it was not a shadow. There was breathing, heartbeat, and spirit undulations. That was a real black dragon. Everyone was so shocked that their hearts stopped beating, and they even forgot to breathe. It's a real black dragon? A divine dragon. Ji Tianqing actually has a divine dragon. This kid actually hit it so well. A divine dragon. A divine dragon rarely seen in the world. In the entire Shenwu continent, there are only a few that have appeared. No wonder Ji Tianqing could become the oracle's child. Similar exclamations appeared in everyone's minds. In the next moment, an earth-shattering sound was heard. Within the 5-colored light barrier, gravel flew everywhere, and dust filled the sky, obscuring everything. The entire Mount God Seal shook violently from the dragon's claw. Everyone steadied themselves and stared at the scene within the light barrier, hoping to see the black dragon again. However, after a long time, the dust in the sky dissipated. Within the 5-colored light barrier, the ground was a mess, and the ground had been reduced to ruins. In the middle of the stage, there was a huge pit. Qin Sangqiong was covered in blood, and his hair was disheveled as he lay in the pit, unconscious. Above the pit, Ji Tianqing stood in the sky with an indifferent expression, his hands empty. The majestic and mighty black dragon had already disappeared. Even the black dragon sword that he had just used was gone. The 2 enforcers and the 6 divine messengers were puzzled. The few young geniuses also stared at Ji Tianqing doubtfully and started whispering to each other. Strange? Where did the black dragon go? What's going on? Why did the black dragon disappear? Like I said, it's impossible for there to be a black dragon. That was just a shadow. Divine dragons are the most precious divine beasts in the world, and there are only a few of them in the entire Shenwu continent. Moreover, the few known divine dragons are reared by the three divine masters. How could they appear so easily? Ji Tianqing's monstrous talent is already terrifying enough. If he really has a divine dragon, then wouldn't he be heaven-defying? Just as everyone was discussing this matter, Ji Tianqing turned to look at the chief enforcer. Chief enforcer, the battle is over, please announce the result. Chief Protector immediately came back to his senses and hurriedly announced in a loud voice, the final battle, Ji Tianqing wins. As his dignified voice sounded, everyone came back to their senses one after another. The few gods' envoys and Wuxia all revealed gratified smiles and applauded. On the other hand, Jiang Ningxue, Song Zhanyu, and the others wore unpleasant looks with complicated feelings. This was a result that no one had expected. Ji Tianqing turned to leave the arena and returned to Hong Qingtian's side. Two golden armored guards went up the arena and flew into the deep pit. They carried the unconscious Qin Sangxiong out. The chief enforcer removed the defensive array and cast a few rays of dazzling light that enveloped the entire arena. In a short while, the ruined arena was repaired. The cracks on the ground were all healed, the deep pit was filled, and the ground was flat again. The chief enforcer stood in the middle of the square and announced in a dignified voice, "Everyone, this year's Divine Disciple Assessment has come to a successful end. The 41 disciples who were eliminated will have 2 days of rest. After 2 days, they will be sent to the Glacier Divine Mine. In addition, the 10 disciples who advanced successfully became honorary divine disciples. Ji Tianqing, ranked first. Qin Sangxiong, ranked second. Song Zhanyu, ranked third. Yin Wuk, ranked fourth. Jiang Ningxue, ranked fifth." The chief enforcer announced the names of the 10 geniuses. Those whose names were called felt a little emotional, and their eyes were filled with gratification. After all, their wish to come to God Sealing Mountain had finally come true. They had finally changed their fates and become honorable divine disciples. From now on, they would be able to cultivate on Mount God bestowment, study profound martial arts techniques, and comprehend the Divine Master's inheritance. This was the dream of all the martial artists in the world. The chief enforcer continued, "Firstly, I would like to congratulate these 10 disciples for becoming divine disciples. Secondly, I would like to announce a very important matter. In 2 months, the top 5 divine disciples will represent the vast divine kingdom to participate in the 3 great divine kingdoms exchange. At that time, the top 15 geniuses of the 3 divine kingdoms will gather and exchange martial arts. I hope that the top 5 divine disciples will be able to get a good ranking in the exchange and bring honor to the vast divine kingdom." Hearing his words, Song Zhanyu, Yin Wuk, Jiang Ningxue and the rest were filled with anticipation. They felt an invisible pressure as if they were carrying a sacred and difficult task. After all, they were going to represent the vast divine kingdom to compete with the geniuses of the other divine kingdoms. At that time, the exchange of the 3 great divine kingdoms would be even more exciting. The other 5 divine disciples were filled with envy and jealousy as they sized up Ji Tianqing and the rest. At this time, the chief enforcer looked at Ji Tianqing and the rest and said, "You have successfully become the top 5 and will be participating in the exchange of the Divine Kingdom's exchange. I will take out 500 million spiritual stones worth of cultivation resources from the treasury to reward you as a sign of recognition. Later on, I will send a few divine messengers to deliver the cultivation resources to you. Now, you have 2 months to prepare. Take this opportunity to recuperate and continue to improve your strength." After saying that, the chief enforcer left the square in front of the palace with the 6 divine messengers. Hong Qingtian gave Ji Tianqing a few words of advice, then turned around and left. Tianqing, if you have time tomorrow, come to the west courtyard. I have something to discuss with you. After a while, there were only a few divine disciples left in the square. Other than the severely injured Qin Sangqiong and Xian Feiyang, who were carried away by the golden armor guards, the rest of them had not left. Everyone gathered around Ji Tianqing and congratulated him with smiles on their faces. Ji Tianqing, congratulations on becoming the champion. Child Ji, you are indeed the son of God. Today's battle was truly an eye-opener. Especially the battle between you and Qin Sangqiong. It was so exciting and dazzling. Child Ji, if we encounter any bottlenecks or difficulties in our cultivation in the future, you must guide us. A few God disciples who were ranked at the bottom were trying to please Ji Tianqing, showing their admiration and intimacy towards him. After all, they were all divine disciples who would be cultivating in Mount God for decades. Ji Tianqing was the number one genius and the son of God. He was definitely the most valued genius. Chapter 1622. The young geniuses who could enter Mount God's ceiling were all quick-witted. Those who could emerge victorious from hundreds of geniuses and become honorary God disciples had their own strengths and were not simple people. In the past half a year, Ji Tianqing had lived in seclusion and rarely interacted with the crowd. Moreover, his words and actions were too arrogant and unrestrained, causing the crowd to dislike him. Hence, the crowd kept a distance from him. Other than Yin Wuxia, no one was close to him. However, it was different now. Ji Tianqing was not only the son of God, but also the number one genius. He had also won the favor of the three guardians. The God disciples present were not fools. Of course, they had to curry favor with him. Even if they disliked him, they had to endure it and smile at him. Whoever dared to offend him would not have a good life in the future. Xian Feiyang, Kuang Long and Lan Yiqing were the best examples. One of them was severely injured and unconscious, dropping from 4th to 8th place. The second one self-destructed and died. The third one was defeated miserably and was about to go to the glacier divine mine to mine. Other than a few God disciples who were ranked at the bottom, they were unusually friendly towards Ji Tianqing and tried to curry favor with him. The other three people's reactions were much calmer. Jiang Ningxue stood outside the crowd and looked at Ji Tianqing quietly. She had mixed feelings and her eyes were filled with disappointment. Song Zhanyu looked unhappy. He frowned and his eyes were cold. Yin Wuxia was calmer. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile. The few disciples of God took turns to fawn on Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing responded with a few indifferent words and dismissed them. At this moment, Yin Wuxia walked in front of Ji Tianqing. He cupped his hands and said, "Young Master Ji, congratulations on becoming the number one genius. You truly deserve this honor. Also, it was unexpected that I was able to rank 4th in the assessment. It was a huge surprise. I have to thank you for taking care of me in the past. Your kindness, Yin Wuxia, will never forget it." Ji Tianqing revealed a faint smile and nodded slightly. There's no need to say any more words of thanks. In the future, you must guard against arrogance and rashness, and work even harder in your cultivation so that you won't let me down. Wuxia nodded his head profusely and said in a firm tone, "Of course. How can I disappoint young Master Ji?" After saying that, he hesitated for a moment before he mustered up the courage to ask, "Oh right, young Master Ji, the black dragon that you released just now, why did it disappear?" This was the biggest question in his mind, and it was also the question that the disciples of God were most concerned about. However, no one had any friendship with Ji Tianqing, but he was Ji Tianqing's friend, so he was the most suitable person to ask this question. Everyone immediately stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting for his answer. Ji Tianqing showed a face full of confusion, pretending not to understand and asked, "What black dragon?" Yin Wuke smiled awkwardly and asked again, "When you were fighting with Qin Sangxiong just now, didn't you release a black dragon and hit him until he fainted?" A few God's disciples could not hold back their excitement and started to ask questions. "Young Master Ji, that was a real black dragon, wasn't it?" "Young Master Ji, why do you have a divine dragon?" "The divine dragon is a rare divine beast. Only the 3 great God Masters have one." "Young Master Ji, could you please show us the black dragon again? This is the first time we have seen a divine dragon in our lives." There was even a young and beautiful disciple of God who intimately hugged Ji Tianqing's arm and begged, "Young Master Ji, please show us again. Please." Ji Tianqing pulled his arm away and said calmly, "You are thinking too much. There is no black dragon. It is all an illusion." After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. Song Zhanyu had been watching coldly from the side. When he saw that Ji Tianqing had become the center of attention and was being flattered, he felt very uncomfortable. When he saw that Ji Tianqing was about to leave, he could not help but add, "Everyone, please don't make things difficult for young Master Ji. Only the great God Masters have a divine dragon. How could he have one? Let's disperse." Ji Tianqing could not be bothered with them. He turned around and walked toward the Heaven Saint Palace. The disciples of God were disappointed. After whispering to each other for a while, they also dispersed. Only Jiang Ningxue stared at Ji Tianqing's back as he walked away under the setting sun. After being stunned for a while, she woke up from her daze and looked around with a guilty conscience. Seeing that there was no one around, she hurried toward the Heaven Saint Palace. Ji Tianqing had just reached the entrance of the Heaven Saint Palace when he heard light footsteps behind him. "Young Master Ji, please wait." A clear and melodious voice sounded. Ji Tianqing stopped and turned his head to look behind him. He saw Jiang Ningxue in a white dress standing on the clean and tidy white stone path, looking at him with a deep gaze. "Miss Jiang, what is it?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked calmly. "I." Jiang Ningxue had a lot to say, but she hid them in her heart. Now that she met Ji Tianqing's clear eyes, she could not say a word. After hesitating for a while, she walked in front of Ji Tianqing. She stared at him and asked, "Young Master Ji, that black dragon just now was transformed from that treasured sword, right?" Ji Tianqing's expression did not change. He asked calmly, "What black dragon? What treasured sword?" Jiang Ningxue pursed her lips and gathered her courage to say, "Young Master Ji, you don't have to hide it from me. When that black dragon appeared, I saw it clearly. It was a divine dragon. As for that treasured sword, it was the one that you said you would give me. Actually, it was not a sword, but a divine dragon, right?" When she asked this question, Jiang Ningxue's heart was filled with regret and self-blame. Her tone was bitter. If she had known that Ji Tianqing was so monstrous that he could defeat Qin Sangxiong and become the #1 genius, she definitely would not have rejected Ji Tianqing's offer. If she had known that the sword was not a sword, but a divine dragon, she was willing to accompany Ji Tianqing for a lifetime, let alone for a night. However, there were no ifs. Ji Tianqing neither admitted nor denied it. He said calmly, "Young Lady Jiang, let bygones be bygones. You don't have to take it to heart. Whether that sword was transformed from the black dragon or not, it has nothing to do with you, right?" After he finished speaking, he turned and walked through the gates of Heaven Saint Palace. Such a casual reply and such a cold attitude caused Jiang Ningxue's heart to ache. "Young Master Ji." She called out in a sorrowful voice and was about to chase after him. However, Heaven Saint Palace was a forbidden area. Outsiders were not allowed to enter. 2 golden armored guards stepped forward and blocked her path with their treasured swords. She could only stop and look at Ji Tianqing through the gates. Unknowingly, 2 streams of tears fell from the corners of her eyes and rolled down her pale cheeks. She endured the pain in her heart and covered her cheeks with her hands. She turned and left in a daze. Once, she was so close to Ji Tianqing and could touch that black dragon. But now, she was a stranger to Ji Tianqing. Chapter 1623. Ji Tianqing returned to the east courtyard of Heaven Saint Palace and sat in his room to meditate. When night fell, a guard came to report that Divine Envoy Lin had come to visit. Ji Tianqing got up and walked out of his room to the guest hall. Lin Daoyi was sitting in the living room, drinking tea, his face filled with a gratified smile. As soon as he saw Ji Tianqing, he stood up and clasped his hands together to congratulate him. Tianqing, congratulations on winning first place and becoming the top god's disciple this year. Ji Tianqing nodded and returned the greeting. Thank you, Divine Envoy Lin. Lin Daoyi did not waste any time and went straight to the point. I know that your time is precious, so let's cut to the chase. I'm here on the orders of the Great Guardian to give you your reward. Here are 200 million spiritual stones worth of cultivation resources, including elixirs, incantations, secret books, and so on. Lin Daoyi took out a black space ring and handed it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said playfully, previously, the Great Guardian said that he would give out 500 million spiritual stones worth of cultivation resources to the top 5 gods' disciples. I thought it would be 100 million each. Why is it that my reward is 200 million spiritual stones worth of cultivation resources? Lin Daoyi smiled. Tianqing, the Great Guardian did give out 500 million spiritual stones worth of cultivation resources, but he did not give it to the 5 of you equally. The 5 of you have different rankings, so you will receive different rewards. As the top god's disciple, you will receive the most generous reward of 200 million spiritual stones. The 5th god's disciple will receive the least reward of 300 million spiritual stones. I see. Ji Tianqing nodded and took the space ring. He used his divine sense to check the contents of the ring. There were mountains of cultivation resources in the space ring and they were divided into 3 areas. In the first area, there were more than 100 exquisite white jade bottles. There were all kinds of elixirs and medicines that could be used to treat injuries, to assist in cultivation, and to increase one's power. In the second area, there were more than a dozen cultivation technique manuals, array diagrams, pill manuals, and so on. All of them were primordial spirit upper grade and supreme grade cultivation techniques. In the third area, there were more than 40 million spiritual stones piled up like a small green mountain, emitting a dazzling light. With so many cultivation resources, it was enough for Ji Tianqing to cultivate in seclusion for 2 years. In addition to the universal treasure box that Hong Chengtian had given him, he would not have to worry about cultivation resources for the next few years. After all, the treasures and resources in the universal treasure box were worth more than 200 million. Ji Tianqing put away the spatial ring and cupped his hands towards Lin Daoyi. Many thanks, Divine Envoy Lin. Thank you for your trouble. Lin Daoyi smiled and returned the greeting. He cupped his hands and said, then I won't disturb you any longer. Farewell. With that, he turned and walked out of the hall, leaving the eastern courtyard. After sending off Lin Daoyi, Ji Tianqing returned to the secret room and put the spiritual stones and cultivation resources into his spatial ring. After organizing these cultivation resources, he sat down in the secret room to cultivate. A few hours later, it was dawn. Ji Tianqing was cultivating when Qian Yu's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Old Ji, come to the sword world quickly. There's a new situation. Qian Yu's tone was urgent and also carried a hint of joy. Ji Tianqing hurriedly stopped cultivating and took out the burial of heaven. Whoosh! With a flash of light, he entered the sword world and appeared in the sky above Anshui City. He stood in the sky and looked down at Anshui City. He saw that Anshui City, which was originally a few dozen miles wide, had now expanded to 100 miles wide. There had only been a few thousand Earth Spirit citizens in the city, but now there were about 2,000. The city was even more majestic, and the buildings in the city were even more dignified. In a mountain range 100 miles away from the city, there was a towering ancient tree that was more than 10,000 feet tall. Billions of lush branches and leaves covered a radius of a few dozen miles, emitting green with spiritual qi that soared to the sky. Without a doubt, this was the green light treasure tree, the body of ancestor Sanju. Ji Tianqing observed for a while and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. At this time, Qian Yu and the Jinshan king flew out of the city lord's mansion. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Qian Yu and the Jinshan king arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. Greetings, young Master Ji. The Jinshan king bowed and greeted. Ji Tianqing slightly nodded and asked, Qian Yu, what happened? Qian Yu pointed to the northeast sky and said, Old Ji, there's a change in that mysterious forbidden area. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and thought, Kenshin's Yang tomb? Did something happen? Thinking of this, he ordered Qian Yu, take me there. Thus, Qian Yu carried him and the Jinshan king and flew through the sky at lightning speed, rushing towards the northeast. About 4 hours later, Qian Yu flew more than 20,000 miles away. In a rolling primitive mountain range, there was a valley with a radius of more than 200 miles. This valley was the location of Kenshin's Yang tomb. Not long after Kenshin's Yang tomb appeared, Ji Tianqing came here once. At that time, a few dozen miles north of the valley was a dark and cold void, which was also the end of the sword world. Now, Ji Tianqing looked around and found that the dark void was at the end of the northern horizon. The distance from Kenshin's Yang tomb to the end of the sword world was at least 1,000 miles. In just a few months, the sword world has expanded by another 1,000 miles? This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind and he was quite surprised. Soon, Qian Yu carried him and the Jinshan king to the vicinity of the valley. He looked down at the valley from above and saw that the valley with a radius of 200 miles was completely covered by a 7-colored light shield. The light barrier was very thick and solid, blooming with dazzling 7-colored divine light and emitting terrifying divine power fluctuations. A few months ago, when Ji Tianqing came here for the first time, the light barrier was only 100 miles wide. Now, the light barrier had expanded to a radius of 200 miles, completely covering the entire valley. Not only that, but the thickness of the light barrier had increased by several times, making it impossible to see what was inside. Even the energy fluctuations emitted by the light barrier were more powerful and terrifying. No one could get within 10 miles of the valley, or else they would be injured by the invisible divine power. Ji Tianqing, Qian Yu, and the Jinshan king could only stop a dozen miles away and look at the valley from afar. Qian Yu frowned and said in a serious tone, Old Ji, the sword world is constantly expanding, and so is this divine array. Its power is also increasing. I was worried that there would be a problem, so I called for you to come take a look. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a serious expression, there shouldn't be any problems for now. The burial of heaven's power is constantly recovering, so the sword world will naturally expand. Chapter 1624. Ji Tianqing circled the Yang tomb a few times and carefully observed it for a long time. Just as he said, as the sword world expanded, the divine formation protecting the Yang tomb was also recovering its power. The formation's power was gradually recovering and the energy fluctuations were also stabilizing. Perhaps the Yang tomb within the formation had also undergone some changes. Unfortunately, the seven-colored light barrier was solid and couldn't be seen through by the naked eye. Ji Tianqing tried to use his consciousness to probe, but he couldn't even get close to the formation, let alone see the situation inside the tomb. He was a bit worried and thought to himself, the defensive formation is getting stronger and stronger, it will definitely recover its power in the future. With my strength and methods, it's almost impossible to break the formation and enter Kenshin's tomb. It seems that the only way to enter Kenshin's tomb is the burial of heaven's method. I need to gather enough materials as soon as possible and help it repair the sword so that it can help me open the formation. An hour later, Ji Tianqing left with Qian Yu and the Jinshan King after seeing that there was nothing wrong with the defensive formation. On the way back, he saw that Qian Yu and the Jinshan King were worried and comforted them, "Don't worry, there won't be any problems with the formation. The sword world is constantly expanding and the world's spiritual energy and all kinds of cultivation resources are becoming more and more abundant. You can't slack off, you must work harder to cultivate and increase your strength." The Jinshan King nodded in agreement. Qian Yu curled his lips and said gloomily, "Old Ji, the changes in the sword world have greatly benefited them." The Jinshan King buried several mineral veins in the mountains outside the city and has been cultivating in them, increasing his strength very quickly. The little black dragon occupied a spirit spring and cultivates in it all day long. Even old ancestor Sanju occupied a spirit vein and transformed into a towering ancient tree to absorb the world's spiritual energy. I'm the only one who hasn't found a suitable place to cultivate. Qian Yu's tone was full of grievances and was a bit unhappy. Ji Tianqing and the Jinshan King both laughed. Qian Yu was even more depressed and said unhappily, "Humph. You're still laughing, don't have any sympathy." "I don't care, old Ji, you have to help me find a good place to cultivate." Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, "The sword world is so big, where am I going to find a cultivation treasure for you? Go look for it yourself. Walk around the sword world a few more times and you might be able to find the treasure land that you want. If you really can't find it, go to the vicinity of that valley. There's a divine grade great formation there, and the heaven and earth spirit chi in the vicinity is exceptionally dense. It's not inferior to the spirit vein treasure lands." Qian Yu thought for a moment and felt that it was reasonable, so he nodded and agreed. Ji Tianqing left the sword world and returned to the secret room. At this time, the sky was already bright. He stood up and walked out of the secret chamber, heading towards the western courtyard of Heaven Saint Palace. Yesterday, after the end of the God-disciple assessment, Hong Qingtian told him that he had something to discuss with him when he had time. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianqing entered the western courtyard. Under the lead of the guard, he arrived at the courtyard where Hong Qingtian lived. At this time, Hong Qingtian was sitting on the roof of the palace as usual, meditating. He wore a pure white long robe, and his face was peaceful and peaceful. Every breath he took caused the clouds to fill the sky and the morning sun to rise. The golden morning sun shone on his body, making him look like a celestial being. His temperament was ethereal, divine, and dignified. Ji Tianqing waited in the courtyard for half an hour before Hong Qingtian finished his cultivation. He flew down from the roof and landed in the courtyard. "Tianqing, it's rare for you to be so considerate, coming to find me so early in the morning." Hong Qingtian greeted Ji Tianqing and laughed heartily. The two of them sat at the stone table under the tree, drinking tea as they talked about serious matters. "Elder Hong, yesterday you said that you had something to discuss with me. What is it?" Hong Qingtian smiled as he stroked his beard and said, "In the past few months, I've sent people to gather Xianbing and Earth Core fire crystals. Now, I've finally gathered them. I came here today to ask when you have time to help me set it up." Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Since the materials are gathered, it'll be easy. I have time today, and I'll be able to set it up quickly." "That's great, then let's begin." Hong Qingtian was quite happy, and he quickly pulled him into the secret room for cultivation. After entering the secret room, Hong Qingtian opened his space ring, took out 2 treasure boxes, and handed them to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing took the treasure boxes, opened them, and saw that they contained earth core fire crystals and outer Xian Bing. One of them was lit with a dark red flame, and it emitted a vast and mighty fire spiritual qi. The other one was light white, and it emitted a bone-chilling cold. After confirming that the materials were correct, Ji Tianqing took out hundreds of spiritual stones, and started to set up a formation in the secret room. He arranged the hundreds of spiritual stones according to a special position, and embedded them on the floor of the secret room, forming a special pattern. After arranging the spiritual stones, he took out the earth core fire crystals and outer Xian Bing, and embedded them in the formation. Hong Qingtian stood at the side and watched quietly. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was very skilled in setting up the formation, his eyes shone brightly, and he was quite pleased and surprised. After about 4 hours, Ji Tianqing finished setting up the formation. The formation was 3 meters in radius, and the pattern on the outside looked like a blooming lotus. The earth core fire crystals and outer Xian Bing were embedded in the stamen of the flower, and they emitted a dark red and light white brilliance, which was especially gorgeous. After Ji Tianqing cast a spell to activate the formation, the entire lotus lit up with a dazzling 5-colored brilliance, and it formed a lotus-like throne. Elder Hong, from now on, you'll cultivate in this formation. Persevere for 2 years, and your injuries will be completely healed, and you'll quickly recover your strength. When Hong Qingtian heard that, his face was full of anticipation, and he asked excitedly, Tianqing, what kind of formation are you setting up? Why have I never seen such a formation before? Does it really have such a miraculous effect? Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, this formation is called the All-Seeing Thousand Spirits formation. It's a special formation from the ancient times, and it hasn't been passed down to the world. Hong Qingtian was even more surprised when he heard that, and his eyes shone even brighter. He asked, a special formation from the ancient times? You're so young, so how did you learn such a profound and exquisite formation? Could it be, your clan or sect is a great clan that has been passed down since the ancient times? Ji Tianqing hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, Elder Hong, you're thinking too much. How can it be so mysterious? I just accidentally learned the inheritance of an ancient powerhouse, and that's how I mastered this formation. Hong Qingtian was suddenly enlightened, and he exclaimed, so that's how it is. No wonder your talent is so monstrous, and you know so many mysterious techniques and secret techniques. No wonder. Before this, he had always been curious about Ji Tianqing's background. The Great Guardian had also discussed this with him, but he had no clue. Chapter 1625. Ever since Ji Tianqing came to Mount God Ceiling, he had been in the limelight for the past 6 months. He had also created many miracles. He was very clear in his heart that his performance was too monstrous, and it would definitely arouse the suspicions of everyone. Due to his identity as the son of the oracle, the guardians and oracles would not blatantly investigate his identity and background. However, they would still be suspicious. Sooner or later, they would find a chance to investigate his background. Hence, he was mentally prepared. He had also thought of an excuse. When Hong Qingtian asked about his background, he admitted that he had learned the legacy of an ancient expert. In this way, the doubts of Hong Qingtian, the Great Guardian, and the few oracles were easily solved. Ji Tianqing chatted with Hong Qingtian for a while more before he bowed and left. Hong Qingtian did not ask him to stay. After sending him off, he sat on the lotus throne and started to recuperate. The effects of the all-seeing thousand spirits array were indeed extraordinary. Very soon, he could feel the effects. The hidden injuries that he had suffered for many years were also quickly alleviating and fading away. His body condition became more stable and normal. His magic power was also recovering quickly. Previously, Ji Tianqing had told him that he could use two types of materials to set up an array to help him recover from his injuries and powers within 2 years. At that time, he could not believe it. He felt that it was unbelievable. Now, he had personally experienced the effects of the array. He was very excited and pleased. He finally believed Ji Tianqing's words. He was looking forward to the day when his powers were fully recovered. After Ji Tianqing left the west courtyard, he returned to the east courtyard. He entered a secret chamber and started to cultivate in seclusion. The great guardian had said that he, Wuxia, and the rest had 2 months to rest. After 2 months, Mount God Sealing would escort the 5 gods' disciples to participate in the exchange meeting between the 3 holy kingdoms. Although Ji Tianqing desperately wanted to see Yunyao, he did not know where the exchange meeting would take place. However, he didn't know where the conference would be held, so he could only wait patiently for another 2 months. During this period, he could cultivate the sword Soul Dao in seclusion to strengthen his martial arts foundation and increase his powers. The flow of time in the secret chamber was 5 times faster than the outside world. Moreover, he had an abundance of cultivation resources. This allowed him to cultivate with twice the result with half the effort, and his progress was extremely fast. Unknowingly, he had been cultivating for 10 days, and his power was steadily increasing. 10 days in the secret room was only 2 days in the outside world. Early in the morning, there were already 41 young geniuses gathered at the square outside the temple. Many of them were injured, and they looked rather miserable. Everyone's mood was very low. Their eyes were filled with pessimism and despair. Everything was gloomy. After all, they were once outstanding geniuses of their respective empires and had a bright future ahead of them. Now that they had failed the test, they would be sent to the Glacier Divine Mine to work as overseers and miners. The atmosphere in the square was very oppressive. Everyone was silent and did not say a word. After a long time, the Great Guardian brought the 2 divine envoys to the square. The Great Guardian said a few simple words and then asked the 2 divine envoys to escort everyone away. The 2 divine envoys took out a black flying boat and let the 41 geniuses board the boat one by one. Not long after, the black flying boat flew into the sky, carrying everyone to the north at lightning speed. At the same time, in the south of the Chu Yun Empire, in a vast and desolate primitive mountain range that was as vast as the sea, there was a giant mountain peak that was 3,000 feet tall. The giant mountain peak was very steep. The trees on the mountain were lush and green, and the heaven and earth spirit Qi was especially abundant. Above the waist of the mountain, it was covered by white clouds. The mountain peak was filled with towering ancient trees. The branches and leaves were luxuriant, and the wind could not pass through. On the surface, the mountain peak maintained its primitive appearance. There were no traces of humans stepping on it. But in reality, there were a few small 2-story buildings hidden under the cover of the towering ancient trees. The 4 small buildings were made of requiem wood. They were completely black and were protected by a powerful saint-level array. An invisible array with a radius of 3,000 feet enveloped the 4 small buildings. Outside the array, there was no trace of it at all. Only after entering the array could one see the few small buildings and a spacious courtyard. At this moment, a handsome young man in a golden robe was sitting at a stone table in the courtyard, drinking wine with a depressed expression. Sitting in front of him was a white-robed, white-haired old man with a sage-like demeanor. He was the Outcloud Empire's sage master. The golden-robed young man drank a few mouthfuls of wine and said with a frown, "Sage master, I've had enough. How long do we have to stay in this damned place?" The sage master had a calm expression and said calmly, "Your Highness, please calm down. Just bear with it for a while longer. The Sage Master will be able to find a result soon. The golden-robed crown prince snorted and said irritably, "We gave up on the flourishing imperial city and actually hid in this godforsaken place. I really don't know what father is thinking." There is not a single person to be seen within a radius of several 100,000 miles. It has been more than 3 months. Sage Master, you say it's soon every time. But how long do we have to wait? I wonder if those few beloved concubines of mine are still alive right now. The imperial palace has been attacked by experts from various countries. I wonder if the imperial guards and garrison troops have been able to defend it? Hearing the crown prince raise these questions, the Sage Master picked up his teacup without a change in expression. He lowered his head and drank silently, not replying. There were some things that anyone with a bit of intelligence would be able to guess. Unfortunately, the crown prince was not smart and far-sighted, so the Sage Master could only hide it from him. If he told the crown prince the truth, it would be even more difficult for him to bear with his current life. Thinking of this, the Sage Master forced out a smile and persuaded, "Your Highness, the Sage Master's grand scheme and plan is not something you and I can guess. You only have to wait patiently for the day the Sage Master returns to the imperial city and unifies the 6 countries. At that time, the Sage Master will be the number 1 person below the Divine Master, and you will be the new Sage Master. You will definitely shine brightly in the world and dominate the 4 seas." The crown prince finally heard something that was pleasing to the ear. His heart was filled with anticipation as he said with a flushed face, "The Sage Master is right. Although I can't help father, I will fully support father's plan. Just bear with it a little longer. There will be a result soon." As he spoke, the crown prince stood up shakily and staggered away. He returned to the house in a drunken stupor and fell asleep on the bed. Seeing this scene, the Sage Master couldn't help but secretly shake his head. His heart was filled with sorrow. The Sage Master is so wise and domineering. How could he give birth to such a frivolous son? It is said that a loving mother leads to a useless son. If the Sage Master didn't always spoil the crown prince, he wouldn't have become like this. Just as he was secretly muttering in his heart, a muffled bang suddenly sounded from the wooden house to the left of the courtyard. The Sage Master subconsciously turned his head and saw a golden palm fly out from the wooden house, destroying a window and half a wall. What's going on? What is the Sage Master doing? Chapter 1626. As soon as the Sage Master flew into the wooden building, he saw the mess in the hall. Emperor Chu Yun stood in the middle of the hall with an ashen face. His entire body was filled with cold anger. Originally, there was a stone table and a stone stool beside him. In the past 3 months, he often sat here to study the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Now, the stone table and stool had been reduced to rubble, scattered all over the messy hall. The ground and walls were shattered and filled with cracks and holes. The Heaven's Burial sword that was as black as ink was stabbed into the northern wall. It was deeply embedded into the wood and was still trembling without end. The Sage Master understood at a glance. The Sage Master must have thrown the Sword of Burial of Heaven out of anger and smashed the table and stool. He also destroyed a wall along the way. "Sage Master, please calm down. This matter cannot be rushed." The Sage Master hurriedly persuaded him calmly. He walked to the northern wall and pulled out the Sword of Burial of Heaven. "Sage Master, the Sword of Burial of Heaven is Kenshin's personal sword. It's the number 1 divine weapon in the world. It's extraordinary. With our abilities, it's understandable that we can't unravel its secrets." The Sage Master persuaded as he carried the Sword of Burial of Heaven back to Emperor Chu Yun. However, Emperor Chu Yun didn't reach out to take it. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and his anger became even more violent. Bastard! Ji Tianqing, that damned bastard! He should die 10 times. I'm going to kill his entire family. Emperor Chu Yun gritted his teeth and cursed. He was so angry that his face was distorted. He was on the verge of going berserk. The sage master had never seen him so angry before. He immediately felt that something was wrong and hurriedly asked, "Sage master, why do you say that? What the hell is going on?" Emperor Chu Yun took 2 deep breaths and gradually suppressed his anger. He shouted in a deep voice, "Take a closer look at that sword." The sage master didn't know what was going on. He lowered his head to look at the treasured sword in his hand and frowned. On the surface, the treasured sword was pitch black like ink. It was ice cold to the touch and emitted an ancient aura. It was extremely normal. The tip of the sword was broken, but there was nothing wrong with the gap. It looked no different from before. However, the sage master vaguely felt that something was amiss. He sensed it with his heart and noticed that the treasured sword was icy cold and deathly still, and it was filled with a deathly aura. How could this be? Previously, this treasured sword clearly had a wisp of spiritual aura, as if it was a living thing. The sage master furrowed his white brows, vaguely understanding the key issue. He raised his head to look at Emperor Chu Yun and asked in disbelief, "Saint Emperor, is this sword?" "That's right." Great Emperor Chu Yun nodded and said coldly, "This sword is fake. This isn't the real burial of heaven." The sage master was immediately filled with shock. He said in disbelief, "This is impossible. When Ji Tianqing presented this sword to us, we checked it carefully. There is no mistake." Great Emperor Chu Yun said expressionlessly, "Ever since I obtained this sword, I've been studying it day and night. I've thought of all sorts of ways, but I still couldn't figure out its secret. Although the appearance of this sword hasn't changed at all, it's exactly the same as the real burial of heaven. However, in the past 2 months, the spiritual aura in the sword has been weakening and becoming thinner and thinner. Until yesterday, the spiritual aura in the treasured sword had completely dissipated. This sword has also become an ordinary primordial soul stage Dharma treasure. It's lifeless and doesn't have any spiritual aura." At this point, Great Emperor Chu Yun's eyes shone with a cold light. He said coldly, "If I'm not wrong, this sword must be a fake forged by Ji Tianqing. That damnable beast, it's absolutely impossible for him to offer the true heaven-burying sword to this emperor." The sage master understood the reason, and his face turned gloomy. He said in a venomous tone, "If that's the case, didn't that despicable bastard Ji Tianqing use a fake sword to cause us to give up the imperial city and the entire empire?" Great Emperor Chu Yun didn't say anything. His eyes shone with a cold light, and his entire body emitted a murderous aura. He was so humiliated that he almost went berserk. Ji Tianqing had only used a fake sword to cause the Chu Yun Empire to be besieged by 5 other empires. He and the sage master had given up the imperial city, causing the Chu Yun Empire to fall apart and be on the verge of collapse. If this matter were to spread, all the cultivators in the world would laugh their heads off. Great Emperor Chu Yun's name would also spread throughout the world and become the laughingstock of the entire vast divine kingdom. At this thought, Great Emperor Chu Yun was so humiliated that he almost vomited blood. The sage master was also furious. However, he could still suppress his anger and maintain a trace of rationality and calmness. After pondering for a moment, he said in a low voice, "Sage master, since we've confirmed that this sword is fake, we have to act as soon as possible to recover our losses. For the past 3 months, I've received news from the various branches of the Shadow Squad every day, so I know the Empire's situation like the back of my hand." Great Emperor Chu Yun said expressionlessly, "What's the current situation of the Empire?" The sage master said in a low voice, "The imperial city has been destroyed by the other empires, and most of the citizens have fled the imperial city. Now, the various northwestern regions have fallen and been annexed by the Great Qian Empire. The 5 eastern regions have also fallen and been forcefully occupied by the White Knight Empire. The 4 western regions have been annexed by the Thousand Snow Empire and have been embroiled in war for the past 2 months. Many cities and the old subordinates of the Sage Master are still resisting tenaciously. Nearly half of the empire's 28 regions have fallen, and only a few regions in the central and southern regions are still struggling to hold on. If the Sage Master doesn't take action, I'm afraid those regions won't be able to hold on for long and will fall soon. Although Great Emperor Chu Yun had expected that the entire empire would be in chaos after he left for 3 months, he didn't expect that the empire would fall into chaos. However, he didn't expect the 5 empires' attacks to be so fierce and swift. In just 3 months, the imperial city has been destroyed, and half of the territory has fallen. The 5 empires are really ruthless. Great Emperor Chu Yun's eyes were bloodshot with anger, and his body was burning with dark red murderous flames. Sage Master, do you have any countermeasures? The Sage Master frowned and thought for a moment before saying, originally, I was planning to hand over this fake sword and let the other empires fight over it, causing internal strife and chaos. However, this sword has lost its spiritual aura, so it's easy to distinguish between the real and the fake. This method won't work, so we have to think of another way. Great Emperor Chu Yun said coldly, so, you don't have a good plan for the time being? The Sage Master nodded silently and said, please give me a few more days, Sage Master. I'll contact the Ennying Hall and my old subordinates and think of another way. Great Emperor Chu Yun nodded slightly and said with murderous intent, we'll think of a long-term plan to recover the lost territory. However, I must first kill Ji Tianqing and obtain the real Sword of the Burial of Heaven. Immediately send an order to the Ennying Hall and have them send their elites to ambush Ji Tianqing near Mount God Bestowment and wait for an opportunity. It would be better if they could capture him alive. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.